All right, we will call the Transportation and Environment Committee meeting to order. We have a quorum with council members Arenas, Diep, Esparza, and myself. And let's see, there's no items on the review of work plans, so we have the consent calendar. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that motion carries, and we can move on to reports to committee. The first one is the Storm Sewer and Sanitary Sewer Annual Report.
Thank you, Council Member. I am Mike O'Connell, one of the Deputy Directors in the Department of Public Works. I work with design delivery teams in the capital programs. With me today is Matthew Nguyen, Division Manager of Transportation and Hydraulic Services, a division within Public Works. And we're here to present to you the annual storm and sanitary reports. This is not strictly a Public Works only issue. We have partner departments, Environmental Services, and the Department of Transportation, and they assist us in our CSA to deliver these services. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Matthew for the bulk of the presentation, and we can take questions either along the way or at the end, whatever you prefer. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Mike. Our storm and sanitary sewer systems are designed to be operated separately, and it's not a combined system, so just want to put it out front. Our storm system consists of 1,100 miles of pipeline, 4,500 miles of curb and gutter, 32,000 inlets, 1,500 outfalls, and also 31 pump stations. Our storm system is designed and built so that it will collect the runoff from the system of curb and gutter and redirect all of the flow into the inlet and through a series of pipeline, and eventually will end up in the creek and the rivers and water bodies surrounding us. In some cases, due to low ground elevation, a pump station will be needed to lift the storm water up or to pump it out to the creek and river. On the other hand, the sanitary sewer system consists of over 2,000 miles of pipeline, over 200,000 service laterals, and also we have 18 pump stations in our system. Our sanitary sewer system collects sewage from residential, commercial, and industrial buildings, and they route through a system of pipeline and interceptor. Everything ends up at the regional wastewater facility, and so it will be treated before releasing into the bay. Since 2015, the city, under the new permit issued by the Water Board, was required to improve our stormwater quality before discharging it into the surrounding water. So to meet this requirement, the Storm CIP includes projects that capture trash and debris using hydrodynamic separators. At the same time, the city also initiated a program to filter the pollutant before we release it to the water. So at the same time, staff also invest into a master planning program to evaluate existing capacity as well as to plan for future needed capacity based on the growth of the city. Besides these activities, staff continues to work on system rehabilitation and improvement. And some of the large projects would include the Aviso pump station. And in the next few years, we're also working on the Chacot area system improvement. One of the highlight technical program that is needed for all large collection system is the master plan program. This is an ongoing multi-year program that allows the city to property plan for capital and maintenance activities. Staff complete phase 1 of the master plan in 2017, which include all of the pipelines of 24-inch and larger. Also, staff took into consideration the effect of high water level in the creek and how it will impact our system conveyance. So through the modeling and analysis, we found that we have 22 projects that has high priority in order to reduce the flood and local ponding in the city. These projects check in at about $215 million. Since the completion of phase 1, staff continue to work on phase 2, which we continue to refine the model, and we also include smaller pipes as well as incorporate flow data from the flow monitor effort. We also work with Valley Water to incorporate creek and river information into our model system, and we use it to evaluate the conveyance, the conveyance of our system. Starting this year, we also split our city into smaller sub-watershed, and we will prioritize the analysis on this watershed based on the outcome from master plan phase 1, as well as based on the known issue. So with that, in the next few years, we're gonna work on the Chacot area, which is in North San Jose, and also we're gonna work on Stockton-Taylor area in Central San Jose. On the capital investment side, we have successfully completed the Aviso Storm Pump Station project. This project was awarded to JMB in 2017, and construction started in April 2018, and we just completed the project in June of this year. This project built a new pump station with a capacity of 110 cubic feet per second, and together with the existing pump station on Gold Street, they will be able to handle the 100-year storm event for the area.
It doesn't like you.
As mentioned earlier, in 2015, the Regional Water Board issued a permit and required the city to reduce the trash load discharging into waterway by 70% by mid-2017, and also a reduction of 80% by July 2019. And so in order to meet this requirement, the city has built a series of large trash capture devices, and these devices are designed so that it will capture all of the trash and debris before it gets out to the creek and water body. And to date, the city completed a total of 6 phases. We built a total of 32 devices, and we met the 80% trash reduction target that the water board requires us to do. And similar to the trash capture requirement, the water board also required the city to initiate a program to filter and capture pollutant before it gets out to the creek. And so with that, the city started a pilot Green Street program, and we applied for grant funding and grant fund to support the design and construction of these projects. These projects are designed to reduce runoff by infiltrating the stormwater through permeable paver as well as some other filtering material. So far, we complete several projects, including the Park Avenue, the Channel Wet, and most recently is the Horace Mann Washington Green Alley. By completing this project, it will allow us to learn more about this type of projects, and we can apply all of the lesson learned and the knowledge, and as well as the cost information to our future Green Street projects, which will be carried out as part of the GSI program. With the approval of Measure T in November last year, staff is now working on one of the projects that was identified in the Master Plan Phase 1, which is the Chacot area system improvement. This area is bounded by Coyote on the east and Guadalupe River on the west. And because it's a low ground and with high creek water level and insufficient system capacity, this area has been prone to local flooding and ponding in the past. So this project is currently in the preliminary design phase right now, and staff is analyzing alternatives, which might include GSI components in the final design. So besides capital and maintenance activities, staff from ESD, DOT, and Public Works, together with the coordination with Valley Water, we have prepared ourselves for the wet season or for the storm season. We made sure that we complete the pump station project in Aviso before the winter season. And also we work with a vendor to rent and deploy temporary pumps to the Chacot area, so it will protect the area during major storm event. We conduct a series of kickoff meetings to prepare staff for the rain season. And lastly, staff from all departments will work closely with the emergency operation services to monitor and to provide support during the storm event. As for the sanitary sewer system, similar to the storm sewer system, the sanitary sewer system focuses on three major components, namely the master planning, the condition assessment, and the system improvement and rehabilitation. The primary goals of these programs are to decrease SSO, to support general growth in the city, improve neighborhood service reliability, and to be in compliance with council policy and regulatory agency requirement. The photo show here is similar to what we have in our city. We have a 60-inch brick interceptor running on 5th Street. It was built over 100 years ago in the late 1800s. It's still running right now, but we are working on a project called 4th Street Major Interceptor, where we're going to build a new interceptor on 4th Street. It will span between Commercial Street all the way to 101, across 101. So the project is under construction right now, and we anticipate the completion of the project in the next 2 years. So all along, one of the primary goals for the program is to reduce SSO in the system. This chart shows the number of SSO.
Can you
over
tell
the
people
years.
what that SSO means?
Oh, it's sanitary sewer overflow. Sorry about that. So this chart shows the number of sanitary sewer overflow over the year. And as you can see, throughout the years, the number of SSO has been reduced significantly. And this is due to a tight coordination and combined effort between many different departments, including DOT, Public Works, and ESD. It go down from 192 in fiscal year 11-12 down to 42 SSO in this past year. It should be noted that last year we saw a very low number of SSO, and we also found out that the rainfall last year was only about half of the other 3 years adjacent to it, namely 15-16 until 18-19. So that probably is the primary reason for a low SSO recorded. So once again, the goal of our program is to ensure there will be adequate capacity to support economic development, and at the same time, we would increase investment to address infrastructure backlogs. And we prioritize our capital improvement program to lower operational costs, to ensure capacity, prevent spills, and also to improve system reliability.
Well, that concludes our presentation. We are here for your questions. I just do want to acknowledge that we have a storm senior named Michael Mai who assisted with this program, and a sanitary sewer senior named Titus Rosellis, and they manage those design teams. And working on a storm or a sanitary sewer project is really one of the best ways that we help our early career professionals gain experience, because anytime you're working on an underground utility, you're always going to either have conflicts or protect all the other existing utilities that are under the street. So when you see us trenching down a sewer line down a residential street, it's typical that we're going to encounter the water laterals for every house on one side of the street or the other, the underground gas feed that feeds the natural gas to those homes. Electrical is also underground in a lot of areas of the city. And there are other utilities that have infrastructure in our city. For instance, the water district has very large pipelines for raw water and treated water. The state has their own project. The Hetch Hetchy aqueducts that come from the Sierra foothills all the way to the peninsula go through North San Jose. And so every time we work on the interceptor system, we are coordinating carefully not to damage that. The other thing I really wanted to mention is Matthew and his team are working on this $43 million design build sewer pipeline interceptor to replace that 60-year-old or that 60-inch brick pipe. And so here I'm at the end of my career at the city, and we're working on phase 6, and I worked on phase 5 actively. And I just wanted to throw out a nugget that my father worked on phase 1. And so I was in college at the time. I didn't really know I'd end up working at the city of San Jose, but I visited that job site. I was down in that tunnel underneath 237. And it's just been really rewarding for Matthew and his team to do something so risky as tunneling underneath the freeway in a high water table. We toured that job just last week. The operator of the tunneling technology, he's a gentleman older than myself, and he's got 30 years of experience. And the way he manipulates the pressures and the dials, it's very similar to when a surgeon is operating on one of your organs. I mean, it's just experience, confidence, reliability, and that's really what we're here with these two programs. We want to make them bulletproof, and when we're out of sight and out of mind, that's because we're doing our job. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael and Matthew, for the presentation. I know it's not a sexy topic for everybody, but these are the things that allow us to go about our daily business without any inconvenience, and keeping us healthy by reducing those overflows is a really big deal. So thank you for your work. Are there any comments from, I don't have any comment cards. It looks like there's comment cards in both boxes. Can those be brought to me, please? Go ahead, Tessa.
I just wanted to comment on when I saw Alviso being mentioned, and in terms of a climate emergency, we have a big deal with Alviso in terms of sea level rise. And so we're going to have to really think about the fact that the people in Alviso are going to have to be moved. And that, you know, yes, really dealing with our water system and our storm sewer and sanitary sewer, that you have really missed the issues of climate emergency in terms of our infrastructure, what is called the critical services. Critical services are food, sanitary waste removal, water. These are critical services. And as we go into a climate emergency, we really need to really think about these issues. So I do applaud you for thinking about the storm system in regards to Alviso, because we are really in a climate emergency and flooding is a big issue. And the last time we flooded in Nagley Park and in the other areas of our community, you missed that. You missed that because you weren't aware of climate emergency. And then you also missed the PG&E issues of climate emergency and getting us prepared. And the preparation for Alviso flooding is going to be a major issue. You're going to have to resettle. Housing is going to be a really big issue, that you're going to have to take those people and find housing. So we need to really focus on climate emergency and being prepared.
Thank you. And it looks like there are no other, there's no other public comment. Councilmember Esparza.
Thank you. So I had a question about the storm outfalls. So on page 21 of the annual report, at the top, it talks about coordination with Valley Water. And so in the second paragraph, it says the city's working to develop a comprehensive outfall program to address the widespread planning and funding needs and the permitting requirements necessary to implement a robust and long-term program, and the fact that right now repairs to existing outfalls are considered on a case-by-case basis. And so overflow is a little, maybe not sexy for Coyote Creek, people living close to that, but I wanted to hear a little bit more about that, how you're working with Valley Water, how you're reviewing that on a case-by-case basis, and then where that plan is.
Certainly. The Department of Transportation has a very knowledgeable, experienced staff member that inspects all the outfalls in the city routinely, sometimes as often as once a year. It's part of our storm preparation to in the fall of each winter to understand the condition of the system, including the pump stations. We just executed a cost-sharing agreement with the Water District to replace an outfall on Thompson Creek, and we just this last summer put a large flap gate on the outfall at Rock Springs Park, and so that's where some of that stormwater migrated up that system. So what we've found from our analysis is that there are other outfalls that we do want to protect with the flap gate, and our strategy to avoid the permitting process is to do an inboard flap gate in city right-of-way. So it's like a flap gate inside of a manhole, so we don't have to go into the creek in the dark at night through the underbrush to inspect and clear those debris. So that's the way I see us moving forward. Additionally, part of our master planning is to look at the age of the storm system when it was built, because what we find is over the last 50 or 60 years, the flood elevation maximum height that was known at the time has slowly changed with all the development. And so a system that may have been built in 1965 and the engineers at the time said it will never need a flap gate, now when you add more development on top of that, we revisit that and find out that now there's enough flow coming down that creek that it's warranted to have a flap gate. So we have a very large program in the storm capital program, because our program has grown from, say, one year it was only $1 million. That was earlier in my career. Now some years we have 10, 11, $12 million a year in that. And so we don't really build a lot of brand new pipelines in the storm program. We really just do these ancillary projects like remove and replace and repair. And so that's why the flap gates is part of our program and will continue to be so.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful. And with that, I'll move to approve, or move.
Thank you. Councilmember Perales?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and the visual of what that 60-inch thick brick sewer system looks like. I had a briefing earlier in regards to the update that we're going to be doing on 4th Street, North 4th Street, in replacing of that, but I had never seen an image of what that might look like on the inside. When you read it brick and you think, in my mind, that's what I thought. I was like, well, I guess a bunch of bricks. That's not what I think of as a sewer, at least the sewers that I've seen, right, in today's day and age. But seeing that image was like, wow, yeah, that's exactly what what it is. It's a bunch of bricks.
Double
holding it
layer.
together.
It's
Yeah.
a double layer of bricks, hand-built by master craftsmen.
Wow. And the fact that that's holding up, 100 and some odd years later, that's pretty tremendous.
And for the first 100 years, all of our manholes were built the same way, out of bricks. It wasn't until 60s and 70s that we started using precast concrete rings for the manholes. And some of the manholes where multiple sewer pipes come together, it's actually a chimney structure with arches and compound curves. And when you see one of those that's still operating, it's a good feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think, well, I think both things, maybe a good feeling from an engineering standpoint, a nervous feeling from another standpoint. So I was looking in here, I wasn't able to find, I know that we have a particular problem within my district of the sanitary sewer smell sort of coming up from a couple different locations, one of them in Japantown, and then the other over in Nagley Park, and the sort of reoccurring theme of what we've tried to do to mediate that or mitigate that is some sort of filter system. And I wanted to see, I didn't see anything in here in regards to, I saw a little bit about odor, but I think they were actual locations in the city that sort of help with that odor reduction, not
Yes.
necessarily this specific as far as a exact location that may have this filtration system. I'm just kind of curious in regards to an update on
And
that
you-
and those two locations.
You are very, very correct. We use both deodorizer filters, and we use something that we installed recently at 7th and Empire called an air jumper. And so when you think of the sewer system, we always design the pipes to be 2/3 full maximum. So we don't want it to get any higher than 2/3 full. There are 2 high tides and 2 low tides a day in a sanitary sewer system. And so when the tide is rising, the air that's in there has to go somewhere. And we typically like to send it on down the pipe. You need air in the sewer system so that you get the right kind of decomposition. You want aerobic versus anaerobic, and that's why you want that sewer system to breathe. And so what we found looking at the pipeline configuration at 7th and Empire is that we didn't have enough airspace in the pipe. So we installed a parallel hollow pipe so that the air jumps in there, goes downstream a little ways, and then dives back in the pipe. So that's a very common. For instance, we have over 120 sanitary sewer siphons, inverted siphons that go under rivers. Well, think about it, those siphons have to run full, and that means the air will always vent out at the upstream manhole. So when we build a siphon, we try to have an air jumper that is a higher elevation pipe so that we can have that. Older siphons that are not built with an air jumper, we have added air jumpers, like strapping them to the side of a bridge. Another high odor complaint zone is in North San Jose on Trimble and Zanker Road. That's in Council District 4. And that was primarily caused because a large pipe from the city of Santa Clara joins into our system at that location. And they recently rehabilitated their pipeline and changed the connection, and that's dramatically decreased the odors at that intersection. Additionally, we, in our junction structures, we custom fabricate Teflon panels that recess into little ledges inside the junction structure, and then we put a waterproof caulking around those panels as well. So it's kind of like like a double pane window, and so it keeps those odors traveling down that interceptor system, and we want to vent them out at something called a soil bed filter, which is up by Plumeria. And so there, it looks like a landscape median island, but it's really got engineered soil with bioactivity going on inside it, and huge fans that lift that odor up and percolate it through that bioenvironment.
Where is that at exactly?
That's on Zanker Road near Plumeria.
Is that's over by the
So north of Trimble.
treatment plant, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because all of the sewer pipes in San Jose merge together in Zanker Road, and there's 4 parallel pipes going up Zanker Road to the treatment plant.
Thank you for that. That actually was helpful. Do you know when the air jumper was installed down in Japantown area?
How many months ago? 9 months ago? I think about 9 months ago.
About 9 months
Yeah.
ago.
Now,
Okay.
we notified the neighborhood, we notified your council assistants, and we also used something, we used to call it a sewer hog, but it's a big sewer cleaning device with a big snorkel on it that goes down, and you don't have to empty the sewer out to clean it. So it basically vacuums up the sediment that's on the bottom, the grit that's on the bottom. So we did that first, saw how much capacity that freed up, then we designed and built that air jumper.
Well, thank you very much for the comprehensive update and for the report as well. And for your history as well with the city and your family.
I just have one question, and it's about the stormwater pump stations list on page 11 of the attachment A. It looks like all of the pump stations have been upgraded unless they're relatively new, built in the 90s or later, except for the one on the top, Hester, was built in 1928, and it has a not upgraded. And I'm wondering, is that because it doesn't need to be, or
Our
it looks
note-
like all the other ones have been, so I'm
Yeah.
curious.
I think it's a pump station that we only use occasionally when we need it, and that's why it says portable pumps there.
Okay,
So some of these, you can like route sewer around the city and use certain low spots when you want to and others when you don't.
okay, so it's still functioning and does not need any kind of upgrade, is that correct?
Yeah, we'll double check on that just in case with our DOT partners.
Okay, great, thanks so much. All right, on the motion, all in favor? Aye. And motion carries, so we will, thank you very much for the report. We will move on to item 2, D2, which is the Vision Zero Action Plan update. We've got a whole team of presenters, it looks like.
Good afternoon, John Russo, Director of Transportation. I'm going to kick this off. What we're talking about today is our Vision Zero program and an action plan that we're presenting to the committee. With me here today is Deputy Chief Tyndall, Captain Dwyer, Lily Limsow, my Deputy Director for Traffic Safety, and Jesse Mintz-Roth, our Program Manager for Vision Zero. The provision of safety in our transportation system continues to be our top priority, and what we want to talk about today is the Vision Zero program. And knowing that we've got a situation and a problem of safety in our system and pedestrian and crashes, we'd like to present an action plan of how we want to address that. Jesse's going to go into that. We're also going to talk about the 3 things that the committee asked us to look into at the last time we were here in May, and that is to really consider how we can really bring some robust data analytics into this program to really help us to invest in the right places and the right measures, as well as some priority action items that we would like to present to the committee today that will likely need additional follow-up from budgetary considerations by council in terms of how we're going to address some of the issues that we have here. And then the committee actually asked us at the last meeting to consider what it would take to actually make a substantial difference in this program with an unconstrained look at what that would be in terms of the staffing of the police department and/or physical changes to the street system that would add to safety. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well today for committee consideration. So I'm going to turn this over to Jesse, and he's going to walk through the presentation. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jesse Mintzroth. I am the Vision Zero Program Manager at the Department of Transportation. Okay, so this slide shows a national rise in pedestrian fatalities, particularly since 2009. This follows our presentation to Transportation Environment Committee in May 6, 2019. Earlier this year, we presented on the growth in traffic fatalities in San Jose at that time. But for a brief overview, this particular slide shows the steep rise in pedestrian fatalities in the U.S. since 2009. That is the backdrop to U.S. cities adopting Vision Zero in recent years. According to the national report that this is from, the top suspected causes nationally are growth in SUV sales, which are heavier and hit pedestrians higher, and the use of smartphones, which really picked up around 2009 and causes distraction for all road users. On the next slide, Vision Zero is now in more than 40 U.S. cities, including 11 cities in California. Vision Zero cities have a clear goal of eliminating traffic fatalities and severe injuries, which are referred to as KSI, which stands for killed or severely injured. Eliminating KSI supports San Jose's other goals, including mode shift away from single occupancy vehicles in the general plan and climate smart San Jose. In May 2019, we presented this data which shows the growth in traffic fatalities in San Jose. They've gone up 37% in the last 10 years, and the city's population grew less than 10% in the same period. In 2018, our last full year of data, 52 people died from a traffic fatality in San Jose. Looking to traffic fatalities by mode, I'll just quickly, the colors in case this is hard to see. Yellow is pedestrian, blue is motor vehicle occupant, the orange color is bicyclists, and the gray color is motorcyclists. Pedestrians are the biggest group, consistent with the national uptrend. In 2018, pedestrians were 24 of 52, or 46%. And that is very overrepresented compared to San Jose's pedestrian mode share. In 2019, it looks like the numbers for this year will place us among the higher years on record, looking at quarters 1 through 3 ending at September 30th. Additionally, quarter 4, which we're now in, is typically higher due to more darkness, such as daylight savings time ending and wetter weather. Vision Zero is very data-driven. By identifying where KSI crashes occur and what types of road users they involve, we can use targeted strategies to reduce them. San Jose Vision Zero has identified 17 priority safety corridors. 15 of them, or 56 miles, are under city jurisdiction, and 2 of them, or 14 miles, are under county jurisdiction. They are multi-lane, high-speed roads. San Jose Police Department collects crashes on all of these roads. So that 70 miles, those 17 roadways, they are 3% of San Jose's roadways, and on them, 43% of fatalities and 33% of severe injuries occur. And if you look to the modes, the type of road user, again, pedestrians are the biggest mode in recent years. If you look to age, looking just at the 2018 data, you can see that the median age of pedestrians, so the 24 of the 52, is 56 years old. The median age of the motor vehicle occupants is 41 years old. The median age of the motorcyclist is 31 years old, and of the cyclists, 59 years old. This suggests the need to use strategies that both raise awareness of the greater issue and also focus safety improvements in locations, and in this case, focused on older pedestrians. Now a discussion of speed, speed versus speeding. So speed is the top factor. And if you look at the image on the right, you see that at 20 miles an hour, the likelihood of a vehicle hitting a pedestrian and dying is 10%. And at 30 miles an hour, it increases to 50%. And at 40 miles an hour or greater, it's 90%. So if we look at San Jose's 17 priority safety corridors by mileage, 94% of their 70 miles have legal posted speed limits over 30 miles an hour, meaning that the chance of death for a pedestrian hit on those roadways is over half. In addition, if we look to police reports from the San Jose Police Department, speeding above the legal posted speeds is the top known factor in KSI crashes. Currently, in California cities do not have the authority to lower speed limits on arterials, but San Jose has participated this year in a zero fatalities task force in Sacramento created under Assembly Bill 2363 to review the way speed limits are set. Now we're moving to the action plan and its 6 priority action areas. We'll be finalizing the action plan and sharing it with stakeholders and returning to council early next year. The first recommendation action area is build robust data analytics tools. San Jose DOT has been working on data analytics both with internal staff resources, also a San Jose State GIS class, and also external consultants. We built the data portal that we're making public today at visionzerosj.org. Internally. It uses GIS and Power BI to show data from the last 5 years, which are January 1, 2014 to December 31, 2018. You can use it to see data by mode, such as pedestrian, motor vehicle, occupant, or bicycle, by council district, by priority safety corridor, or you can check a box to see just fatalities or just KSI. In the past year, we've worked with a startup called Urban Logic on a pilot demonstration project for the city that layers city data with other data from other departments or even privately collected data. In order to continue working with consultants through an RFP process, we estimate we need $200,000 per year to develop and maintain tools that can use the city data layered with other types of data to give us more insights into some of the harder questions in the KSI trends. The second area is to form a Vision Zero task force. Vision Zero is beyond the scope of the Department of Transportation and the Police Department. Vision Zero cities that have lowered their traffic fatality rate per 100,000 and lead other U.S. cities in this effort have task forces. The task forces are led by a member of the jurisdiction's legislative body. Their membership is primarily city departments working on strategies and initiatives. In San Jose, county agency participation would also be necessary, such as the Department of Public Health, trauma centers in the county, ambulances, the VTA, roads and airports that work on expressways, the medical examiner coroner, and the county sheriff. In the second slide on the Vision Zero task force, we're talking about how it would work and some of the items in the work plan. The task force would meet quarterly to review traffic fatalities and severe injuries. In addition, we would keep the 2 transportation and environment presentations per year. In spring, reporting on the previous year's data, and in fall, reporting on actions and progress. If created, the task force would also continually review and approve the Vision Zero action plan. Some initial work plan items include, as I mentioned, the quarterly review of traffic fatalities, but also of enforcement and citations, including the top 5 contributing factors to KSI crashes. Another one is data integration, linking the police crash records that we have with the public health records, the medical examiner's records, the trauma center injury records. This idea follows San Francisco's best practice. They found that over 30% of KSI are not in the police reports. Additionally, there are crashes collected by the county sheriff for the VTA, which are also not yet in our database. Working with other departments, we plan to undertake a holistic systems approach to improving pedestrian safety across facilities, including intersections between roadways and trails with the Parks Department, transit with VTA, adjacent to construction sites where the city does not consistently enforce provisions of pedestrian access with planning and public works, and additional traffic signal infrastructure and timing modifications with DOT. The third is to increase traffic enforcement staff at the police department and prioritize KSI reduction strategies in their deployment. The graph shows that traffic fatalities have increased as TEU staff has decreased in recent years. This year, though, TEU staff has risen to 10, its first increase since 2010. We recommend the police department quickly fill up to the allocation of 24 officers. And looking to the top 5 known KSI contributing factors, we'd like to work with the police department to focus enforcement and citations in these areas, including the locations in the city and the times of day, including the evening. Area 4 is to build a culture of safety through community engagement. This year, we rolled out a senior pedestrian awareness campaign that we brought from San Francisco, which you can see on this slide in 4 languages. It's the first Vision Zero safety messaging campaign to be used by multiple Bay Area cities, which has the plus of increasing the chance that you may see it around the Bay Area. And it's now being installed on Jackson as well as King, and as well as other high KSI areas involving older pedestrians. We last week put out a campaign that uses changeable message signs to fight the spike around daylight savings time that occurs when there's more crashes during darker periods of the year. And we're looking to bring on a research fellow to evaluate effective outreach strategies from other Vision Zero cities. We have identified a need for $300,000 per year annually for education and engagement in high KSI areas. The 5th priority area is quick build safety projects. The current way that street redesign is done is through capital projects, and capital projects are both costly and take a long time. About 5 years is pretty common. In order to build faster and cheaper projects that get quicker results that would allow us to respond more quickly and see results in a year or two, we recommend using the quick build approach, which was tested last year in the Better Bikeways project, which is around here downtown, which built about 10 miles of improvements using paint, signs, bollards, and cost about 3.5% the cost of a comparable capital project, and was delivered in much less time. We would use this approach in locations that the KSI data prioritizes, and we recommend beginning with the city's priority safety corridors, which are the 56 miles and represent 33% of fatalities. We estimate this would cost $20 million on those locations. We would then like to continue with the city's arterials that are not designated as priority safety corridors, and that's 330 miles of roadway and accounts for 41% of fatalities. Additionally, we'd like to work with the county through the task force, and that is on the ones that are designated priority safety corridors. 14 miles are 10% of fatalities. We'd also like to work with VTA through the task force on safer access to transit. The last action area is to prioritize resources on KSI reduction strategies. Looking from our data analytics, you can see here the KSI by council district in San Jose, and we see that the districts with the most KSI are 3, 5, 6, and 7. And we propose to use the data analytics tool, such as the one now available on visionzerosj.org, to inform investment decisions. As part of the 2019-2020 mid-year budget process, DOT will identify opportunities to dedicate resources to the top priority actions. Finally, at the May 6, 2019 T&E meeting where we presented last, we were asked to create estimates of unconstrained Vision Zero costs. And so in these same areas that we've already discussed earlier in the presentation, some ideas of the unconstrained costs. For ongoing robust data analytics, we estimate that it would be $400,000 annually. That would include hiring a data scientist on staff. Robust engagement and education, we estimate $1 million per year. Expand TEU enforcement to 50 to 100 officers. We estimate that would be $6 to $19 million a year. On major arterials, to build complete street projects in capital, such as what the Alameda has now, and put traffic signals in with the same spacing as downtown San Jose. We estimate that would cost $560 million for the 56 miles of priority safety corridors and over $3 billion for the 330 miles of other arterial roadways. So, in summary, we presented here the data for the last 5 years, the traffic fatality data through the end of Q3 2019, key priority action areas for your consideration, and the estimated unconstrained costs of Vision Zero in San Jose.
That completes our report. Thank you.
Thank you. We have many cards from the public. First is Kirsten Smith. And while you're coming up, Nikita Sina, Gina LeBlanc, and I'm not sure, Kirkpatrick, William Kirkpatrick, Will Kirkpatrick, and John Cordes. Go ahead.
Sorry, my name is Kirsten Smith, so bear with me because this is extremely emotional for me. 4 weeks from tomorrow, 4 weeks from tomorrow, my father, Bob Lavin, was hit and killed on Kirtner Avenue. I know Council Member Davis came out to support us. It should have never happened, you guys. Hearing that for 6 years you've seen a trend in KSIs go up, and we're watching our TEUs, sorry, I'm learning the lingo, drop. How do we let that go? How did no one see that for 6 years? How do we not catch it? You know, I'm born and raised in San Jose. When I was growing up, San Jose was the safest big city in America for about 5 years running. It's not anymore, and we need more. We need to give these gentlemen whatever they ask for, because there are people that go out for a walk or their daily bike ride and do not come home to their families. There are families that are destroyed because of this. And I do appreciate what you guys are doing. I'm really grateful. We're one of the fortunate ones because the person who hit and killed my father left the scene of the accident. I'm told that only about 40% are actually caught. We don't have any cameras. We don't have enough police officers. You know, luckily they caught the guy who did this to my dad, and they've been doing everything they can to build a strong case. We need the cameras, we need the stoplights. This place where the accident happened, where my father's life was taken, less than 2 years before, another person was hit and killed, a pedestrian. So we deserve better in San Jose, you guys, and I'm asking for better. I'm asking to build a place where I can actually let my daughter ride her bike on the streets and have the same kind of safe feeling I felt when I was home. So I ask that you guys just consider what they're asking for. And all due respect, my dad is not a KSI. His name is Bob Lavin. He was a 62-year-old grandfather. Went out for his daily bike ride, grandfather of 3, with his wife since they were 14 years old, and he didn't come home. So I know you need your lingo, but he's a person. We have to stop putting them in graphs into statistics. They're people that don't come home. They're lives that are destroyed. So please, please back what these people are asking for. Okay?
Thank you. Nikita?
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Nikita Sinha. I'm the Walk San Jose Program Manager with California Walks. I want to thank you for the opportunity to comment on the memo and the action plan. There have been 43 traffic fatalities in San Jose this year. That's 43 in 10 months. And 24 of those people were killed while walking and biking. Each of these deaths are unacceptable and preventable. And this action plan is providing us with a key opportunity to change kind of the momentum of what we've had with Vision Zero, which is no success, really. I think it's really important for us to take this opportunity to put together a plan that's going to serve as a successful guiding document for us over the next 4 to 6 years, as staff has included in their memo. I'm really happy that they've included and put together that list that was up there of the need for annual funding. I think staff is doing really great work with the minimal resources that they have, and the best thing that we can do right now is resource them and fund them and put together a program that is actually working towards zero rather than, as we've seen in those graphs, just getting worse every year. I think traffic safety is a foundational element for us having a high quality of life in this city and letting people thrive. And I think that if this document is going to serve us for 4 to 6 years, we really need to put all the resources we have available into it. And with my remaining time, I want to just acknowledge the 2 most recent fatalities that we've had. William Pavio, who was 56 years old and died while walking on October 23rd, and Gerald Williams, who was 91 years old, who died while biking, also in October. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members and staff. My name is John Cordes, and I'm here on behalf of the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. Our purpose is to create healthy communities, environment, and economy through the everyday use of bicycles for all people, for all purposes. We're members of the San Jose Vision Zero Coalition, and we've been working on trying to make San Jose a safer city for years now. And we think that a good Vision Zero plan is a critical step in making that happen. I want to thank you very much for San Jose being caring enough about the safety of your residents to be one of the first cities to create a Vision Zero policy and plan, and for accepting what a challenging goal that is. You know, we've had it since 2015, and unfortunately, little progress has been made. Regarding this specific update, SVBC wants to stress a couple of the things that we really support. We think that forming the Vision Zero task force is the right step for the city. Vision Zero is a long-term project, right? Your goal is to reduce it by half in 10 years, and is intended to be data-driven and requires public collaboration. So please make sure to include representative of those being killed and injured on the task force. Action number 5, allocation of $20 million to enable staff to do quick build projects. It is critical that we get safety improvements on the ground as fast as possible, so please approve that action. Objective D, focus on reducing speed on major roads and the safety priority corridors. Again, you know, this is going to save lives right now. We need to figure out how to make our roads safe for all users, not just for those in vehicles. We recommend the following changes. The final plan has to have measurable goals. The current last update, the 2-year plan, had nothing measurable in it. Please make sure that doesn't happen again. Current investment levels are not sufficient. Please increase them, and please continue to encourage more participants to use bikes more often. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, never done this before. Hi. I'm bringing a human face to the data that we're seeing today. This is my son, Kyle. I'm Gina LeBlanc. I'm a bereaved mother. My son, Kyle, was a pedestrian in January of 2016 when he was hit by a truck on Kirtner Avenue and died. He's a data point on the pedestrian fatality map for the city of San Jose. But Kyle was so much more than a data point. Kyle was an amazing and brilliant young man. He had just turned 18 years old. He was on his high school basketball team and was going to be the DJ for the Valentine's dance. He was looking forward to the senior prom and graduation in June. Kyle was proud to be a techie. At the age of 5, he learned to build electrical circuits with his grandfather. He was so creative and always thinking of new and better ways to use technology. It seemed he had a new idea every day that used electricity and circuits. He enjoyed taking used parts and building computers from scratch. When he was 17, he built 12 computers and devised a way to network them all in his bedroom, dimming our lights, but created his own cloud. Kyle had plans to attend college in the fall and learn more about computer networking. His dream was to one day work for Google. He was an energetic, funny, loving young man. On the evening that Kyle died, he was taking public transit and knew our local system very well. What he did not know was that the area near the light rail station on Kirtner Avenue was unsafe for pedestrians. The lights were out under the 87 overpass, where cars merge at 45 miles per hour into the bike lane to get onto the freeway on-ramp. The crosswalks were confusing, and there were no signs to direct pedestrians to a safer pathway. Exactly 11 months later, another pedestrian was killed there, December 2017. I feel saddened that a dangerous situation is allowed to continue and no changes have been made, as though my son's death and life did not matter. Kyle mattered. He still matters. Kyle was a son, a grandson, a cousin, a nephew, a big brother, and a friend. I miss his smile, his laugh, his beautiful energy. This is my son, not just a data point. Kyle LeBlanc, please remember him. Please make pedestrian safety a priority. Thank you.
Thank you. After the next speaker is Diane Solomon, Paul Marshall, Tessa Woodmansee, and Blair Beekman.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Bill Kirkpatrick. I am an older pedestrian. I am a resident of Councilmember Perales' district. I commend him for the memorandum which was submitted, and I urge you to incorporate his ideas. I have 3 comments. The first is, if anything, this recommendation is too tame. I want you to think about just closing down streets, something like Bassett Street near First, which is a very dangerous intersection. Just plan it over. The second is your plans for Vision Zero should be incorporated with the city's very laudable plans to develop walkability and bicycles and things like that. And finally, you need to think about ways to enforce this. This city has all kinds of great ideas which can't be enforced or protected because of, I'm told again and again, lack of money, such as bicycle lanes, city parks, things like that. There's got to be a way you can recruit volunteers to speak about this and make these concerns better known, because once this program starts, there's just going to be a tremendous outcry from people who think the right to drive the car is God-given. It's time to face the music that the day of the private automobile in a big city is over, particularly where I live, which is in beautiful downtown San Jose, and the site of quite a number of deaths. So thank you. Adopt their plan and make it even stricter. You get what you pay for.
We love you. Thank you.
Thank you. Diane?
I'm Diane Solomon. I'm a community member and lifelong resident of San Jose. I live in District 6. I'm a little nervous, so I have something to read. Honorable council members, I understand that our city residents have many competing urgent needs and funds, and we don't have a lot to, enough funds to address everything. I agree with everything people have said before us, but with respect to the Vision Zero Update and Action Plan dated October 16th and today's presentation, I don't think more money needs to be spent on consultants. We can't consult our way out of this, and we have great information already. You have the data that you've already accumulated over the years. You've got California Walk San Jose as a resource, the Bike Coalition, your advisory committees, the neighborhood associations. We know what's wrong, and we know what the one measurable goal is, right? So this program has been in effect since 2015, yet our city's Vision Zero website is silent on the 17 Vision Zero corridors. I looked for it, I couldn't find it, and I respectfully request that these are named and mapped out for all to see in as many places on our website as possible. On our neighborhood associations have them, so we all know that they're there. And I had some sort of ideas. I mean, it doesn't all cost money, but how about asking every City of San Jose employee on a voluntary basis to review these corridors and make a pledge to drive more slowly and be more aware? Vision Zero, I don't think, should be a siloed initiative. So looking at what's happened since 2015, don't see a lot of improvement. Yes, I realize nationally it's gone up, but my understanding is we have more, our bike and pedestrian fatalities are 3 times the national average. My understanding, I don't think this should be a siloed initiative. Every city department should be on board and stoked about reducing traffic fatalities. I agree, task force, good idea, but members should include our brave and courageous police department and our capable city engineers, planners, and most important, the DOT members in charge of traffic light placements and street configuring. All the relevant departments should work on this. Don't disregard them for consultants and data scientists. You've got competent people here. Please utilize your Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, your Senior Citizens Commission, and the many neighborhood associations. I don't think you can educate your way out of this, or we can educate our way out of this, or analyze data endlessly about this. I think the long-term solution really is street infrastructure changes, like more traffic signals to slow drivers down on these corridors. We can't have police there. Anyway, thank you and for listening, and appreciate this opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you. Paul Marshall?
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you very much for letting me speak. Just before Halloween, I live in District 3, 19th Street. Councilmember Peralez was nice enough to organize a community meeting, and the response was overwhelming. So I would like to thank Mr. Ristow for being here, and also San Jose PD. So being a resident of District 3, it looks by the study that I looked at, we're 3 out of 4 highest numbers in the category, which is obviously nothing to gloat about. But I would like to see us to be a little bit proactive in regards, versus being reactive. We have BART coming, so that's obviously a big thing. With no direct freeway access to the Berryessa BART station, our neighborhood is going to be more of a thoroughfare to getting to and from the BART station, so traffic is only going to increase. In regards to traffic enforcement, I know that traffic enforcement unit for San Jose PD was depleted. That's going to be like that for a while, just based on numbers alone. I know that they are 300 short. That's just of regular patrol. That's not specialized units such as traffic. So we're also missing a massive data point with that, with citations, because we can't actually go back and look at how many citations we have for speeding or anything like that, because we don't have any, based on the fact that we don't have any traffic enforcement, or not enough. So I'd urge the Department of Transportation to please continue to research federal grants, also budget allocation for District 3, due to the amount of crashes and things that we have in our district. So, and ultimately, I think traffic calming measures, in my own mind, would be the best thing. They're mostly permanent. They don't take breaks or lunches or things like that. So also the cost I think would be offsetting. So that's what I would like, is to just please make that a priority so that we can envision something long-term instead of reacting. Thank you.
Thank you. Tessa?
Tessa Woodman-C. I do not excuse our current politicians for their lack of accountability for this traumatic incidents that are happening in our community. You are all responsible. Blood is on all of your hands. And what it is that we have no accountability for the way the system works. Your Department of Transportation is broken. Your council members are broken. We can't get action. And what I wrote my letter here is about accountability. We need to have, when we report things to the Department of Transportation or to our council members, they do nothing. Okay, this is what is happening. We have no accountability. You have no accountability to us. Diane says you can go to your DOT site and you can't even tell where these streets are that are part of your system that you spent millions and billions of dollars on. We have no accountability for when we report things to you. We need accountability. When we report things to you, you respond back to us. We get a case number. Okay, a case number. This is how good cities run. This is how San Francisco runs. This is how New York City runs. You are not running this city with accountability. You have gotten in trouble about that in terms of not open government, and you were busted on it. Well, you're still failing. That's why we're in the world of hurt. And on top of it, when we have accidents that happen, you have to look at root cause analysis and then fix it. That's what a good city does. That's what a good business does. Fix it. Root cause analysis. So So when my husband gets hit on a street and I tell the city that they need a left-hand turn signal there to separate the traffic from the ongoing pedestrians and bicyclists, you fix it. Okay? And the thing is, in terms of police, that is not an answer. Raul Perales is a policeman. He is serving his own community. We need structural change. We need structural change to improve our city's streets. And that's what the money needs to go towards, and a lot more. Am I done?
Yes.
Okay, fine.
Thank you.
You can say it with a good, happy attitude. Say thank you.
Blair Beekman is next, and after that is Marshall Woodmansee, Roland, and Brandon Alvarado.
Hi, thank you. I've been away for a while. Hello. I hope I can remind how Vision Zero can be a part of our new recent ideas of transparency and accountability. These are ideas meant to be public, open, and shared. The Vision Zero memos today seem written for a person to understand some new numbers that with more police manpower and law enforcement practices, pre-2010 had fewer automobile, bicycle, and pedestrian deaths in San Jose. In other countries of the world, from Mexico to Europe, from Canada to Asia, ideas around Vision Zero type programs stress the importance on what can create a more ambient and environmentally friendly whole community approach, and that surveillance technology and its law enforcement can be considered only a small part of an overall larger picture. It seems the city of San Jose, with its law enforcement and surveillance and its lack of manpower, will be much relying on the overall holistic community purpose of Vision Zero. I feel over the past few years, the city and people of San Jose have been trying to create good beginning definitions of Vision Zero. Yet I hope I can remind at this time how there may always be an important need to differentiate between law enforcement and surveillance technology practices of Vision Zero compared with more encompassing overall ideas of good everyday neighborhood communication, environmentalism, and ideas of sustainability. I feel this can be a good way to help define how to think about and talk about and work with the Vision Zero in San Jose, and overall how we like to talk about the relationship between everyday people, local government, and its police department. Thank you for listening to my words on this subject.
Thank you. Marshall?
Hello, City Council, and good afternoon. My name is Marshall Woodmansee, candidate for San Jose City Council District 6. It is great to see that we are thinking about doing a Vision Zero task force. I do believe that adding more minds to this organization will increase the transparency of what's going on and better help spread the mission of Vision Zero to all residents of San Jose. It is sad that when it comes to funding for lives and for the saving of lives, it almost sounds as if we're pleading for money. There's terms like awarded and granted, as if public safety when it comes to traffic is something that is an award, that maybe once in a while we'll get a couple $1 million. And I do implore you to look into consistent funding sources, especially as large developments come to San Jose, like the Google development. I think we have an amazing opportunity to secure consistent funding for this committee and for Vision Zero task force. In regards to the solution of adding more transit officers, it's necessary but not sufficient when it comes to reducing fatalities. Even when we had as many as 50 officers on our streets patrolling and helping mitigate traffic-related accidents, there were still 30 fatalities annually. So we have to accompany police action and police power with the redesigning of our streets. Every time I see a roundabout, it just makes me so happy as a cyclist. Where we have wide streets, we need roundabouts. And where we have narrow streets, we need to talk about making them not through streets, talking with the community members to figure out what they need to increase their street safety. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Roland?
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity. So we have the statistics here, and it's very clear. what we're seeing, that whatever it is we're doing right now about Vision Zero is not working. And we need to start taking a fresh look. So I think you've heard it from at least half a dozen of our constituents before me, but the solution is to start establishing different zones for pedestrians and vehicular traffic. And there's two ways you can do it. It's in 2 dimensions. Have a zone saying this is a pedestrian zone and the vehicles go somewhere else, or you can do it in 3 dimensions. And I'll give you 2 examples. One is the Transbay Tower in San Francisco. You can be up on the 4th floor of the building, walk right through the building, and you'll hit the park above the Transbay Transit Center road, walk right through it, and you'll be walking through a building at the other end. That's one example. Another example is Minneapolis, and quite frankly, the entire surface has disappeared. The retail's died, everything else, because everybody's moved up to air conditioning, and everything in Minneapolis is happening on the 2nd story and up. And then that brings us to Thursday, and we're going to have the scoping meeting for Google. And what are we doing? We're building another square street grid. We're adding streets in the Derrida station area that do not currently exist. We're going to bisect the station from the Google campus. And what's going to happen? We're going to start killing more constituents. Why are we adding another 20 acres of streets in the Derrida area? So in closing, enforcement is band-aid at best. The root cause analysis, as Tessa mentioned, is to start designing our cities for the 21st century and beyond, and hopefully starting at the end. Oh, through the chair, what's a KSI? Thank you.
Thank you. KSI, as described, is killed or severely injured. So it is a count of those individuals. Brandon Alvarado.
All right, good afternoon, Council. Thank you, everybody, as a part of this Vision Zero movement in our city. My name is Brandon Alvarado, and I do chair the San Jose Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee for our city here, but I'm actually here today representing the group we call San Jose Ride of Silence. It's a group dedicated towards raising awareness of traffic safety through organized rides in our city. We've done 2 organized rides recently to raise awareness of the traffic fatalities specific to bicycle riders, but we also are interested in fatalities for everybody. I just quickly wanted to point out, per the report, it does say Vision Zero City minimum standards is to have a clear goal, is listed there. And then number 4 on the bullet in the report, it does say that key city departments, including the police department. So as somebody who has organized a couple rides and have been reaching out to my local police department, I have not been successful and look forward to working with multiple departments on this group effort. To jump right in, I just want to quickly say that the most recent ride that we organized was for Bobby Lavin, who was killed on Kirtner Avenue, as Kirsten just mentioned. And I want to point out that where I work, I actually commute along the exact intersection in which that incident happened every single day to and from work, and I'm reminded of that and sometimes stop and sit there. And 3 times Kirtner has been brought up. I'm still here and other people aren't, and that's how serious this is. And so I will still keep riding because I believe that we can work together for safer streets, although we know that they're not safe. Going to the report and very specifics, I do ask that you support the allocation for funding for this Vision Zero plan. Then number 2, the task force, I think, is an amazing asset, but it should also include members of the public at large, and also, like John mentioned from SVBC, I think it should also include specific members who've been affected by traffic violence. The item number 4, community engagement and education. I believe that education is its own subject and should get its own focus, so I would actually break that up.
Thank you.
And I encourage you all to reach out to me as a resource, and as Diane mentioned, other resources such as BPAC members, community members, and I look forward to working with you all on this problem that we have in our city. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll now turn to the members of the committee for comments. Councilmember Arenas.
Thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to thank everybody who's come out and shared their experiences and unfortunately some of their losses. And I'm so sorry for your loss, for all those folks who are out there. As a mom of an 11 and a 5-year-old, I can only imagine what that loss would be. I don't even let my 11-year-old go down the street. Well, only the dead-end street, because it dead ends into nowhere. But as my son grows and as your children grow, we want to make sure that our streets are safe, that we don't confine them to a dead-end street, because we feel safer. And so I have a couple of questions, and also for the advocates who are here, thank you for making time to be here and to prioritize this issue today. So I have a couple of questions for the group. This action plan and the top priorities, how are you going to prioritize all of them? I know they're numbered, but I don't believe they're numbered in order of priority, correct?
No, they're not in any priority. It's our intention to actually do all of these.
Mm-hmm.
We think it's that important to actually conduct effort to actually complete all of these.
Okay, so you intend to do all of this at the same time, simultaneously. Okay, well, that is a wonderful goal to have. I'm not sure how that will work out. But one of the things that I wanted to emphasize is making sure that we have the, let me see, sorry, I circled these. The reduction strategies in number 3, if it matters at all, I'd love to see the strategies for the case SI reduction strategies prioritized, along with the task force, and lastly, the engagement to build a culture of safety. And I'll say this, I think when we're messaging, and I saw that message that you all used from San Francisco, I don't know if that's the most effective. I don't know if you know if it is the most effective. How did we come to decide on that one?
That campaign was very well regarded in San Francisco, and it was right on target for something that we also needed to address. It's one of the first things that we found in our research is that older pedestrians
Right.
are one of the focus areas that are not currently focused on in San Jose.
Right.
So they had done a professional design strategy to get to that ad, and they had it focus grouped it, and they had it very well regarded, so we looked into bringing it here.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, there's a huge difference between San Francisco and San Jose, and so I wonder if we could continue to revisit that. I think you're on the right track in terms of the age range, because obviously it looked like there were a lot of older folks in that category that were impacted. But I think there also needs to be some type of partnership with our school system and our county. I think your walk and roll program, John, does a really great job in preparing this pipeline of children who are going to opt for public transit modes instead of going into the cars, right? And I think we need to begin to champion some of these issues through our schools and through the messaging that we have. I'm sure that the messaging that you have for the older pedestrians and bicyclists will work maybe with the general public, but I think we need to think also about something that goes along with the children, so that they can grow up with those safety measures in mind. And I was thinking about the state of Texas had a big littering problem in the 80s, and they couldn't figure out there was like about $20 million that was being spent on an annual basis. And they just couldn't figure out how to message, how to get the message across to their residents. And so they hired a consultant, they came up with Don't Mess with Texas. That's where that all comes from, right? That's an effective And, and they would use these big barrels, and it says, fill it up, buttercup, or, all kinds of sassy sayings. But they were targeting men in certain age range. I can't remember exactly what it was, but they really honed in on the message. And I think that this is where I'm coming from, that the work that we're doing with everything on this list is important. But I think when we're creating the next generation of public transit writers, that we're actually creating the next generation of public transit writers with some safety measures in mind, right? Whatever that messaging will be, whatever is most effective. But I think when we get it right, that we can make a huge difference. So the messaging that you have for the seniors may work, I think, for the overall city. But I think we also need to start preparing our next generation of folks with some other messaging that will work for them, that will speak to them. And I think that is a big investment, aside from all of the other safety measures that we're going to take. I'll tell you that the quick build really speaks to me, and I think I've seen quite a few changes downtown. This is where I spend most of the time in my car, is downtown. And it just tells you exactly where to go and what to respect and not to go over a certain line. And I think I can't wait to have all of that in some of my transit, heavy transited corridors like Tully. I know we're going to have a project pretty soon out there. But all of these just very simple measures can save lives, right? Especially for those folks who are older and who we see are continuing to use their bikes or are walking. And I would emphasize prioritizing that as well. So for me, it would be, the task force, the messaging, of course, the KSI reduction strategies, and the quick build. I don't know how you'll get all this done all at the same time. I applaud you for taking this on. But if there was any way of prioritizing maybe this on the list, for what it's worth, this is what I'm saying is important to me and to my district. I have Silver Creek Valley Road and Yerba Buena Road, who are there's constantly accidents happening because it's a fun road, right? It's curvy and long, and some of the things that we've been doing, by the way, some of it is effective and some of it not. Like the ballards that are up and down on Yerba Buena, those are like 75% gone, because they almost seem like a target for people in the cars, right, to knock them down. And so that's where I think the messaging comes hand in hand, is how are we combining all of our efforts to make the most impact. That's my feedback for the priorities. And then moving on to, I have a question about the expressways. You have Capitol and Almaden expressways that have 26 fatalities. Is it in each, or is it combination?
The 26 fatalities is in combination for both of those expressways over 5 years.
Over 5 years. And so would Capitol Expressway be one of those corridors that you would prioritize?
Yes, I mean, obviously we'd have to work with the county because they're not under our
Right.
jurisdiction. But Capitol Expressway has 20 alone.
And what is the work that we're doing with the county? How are we pulling them into these conversations that we're having?
Can I jump in here? Lily Lim, with Deputy Director over Traffic Operations and Safety. One example of the ways that I try to engage the county roads and airport, and when we're doing traffic signal project, is to look at coordination of our signals, the facilities that we construct. Many a times we're talking about a state right-of-way, city signals on both sides of the streets, the county sandwich in between, feeding into the roadway network. We sit down as traffic engineers of the county to talk about succinct operational strategy that works for different times of days, different user groups. It's an example of how we work together. There's many more ways we need to work together. For example, Capitol Expressway with the lighting that we had installed about a decade ago. It was our emphasis, the city's emphasis, to get lighting on that street for pedestrian mode. We consist on more lighting on the expressways, and we see the need to do more, work together more on the task force. And in fact, all the agencies that Jesse named, they have a huge role in making our streets safer, and we need to bring them into the fold.
Thank you. It sounds like these are all very technical. Maybe you call them operational strategies. And
Yes.
Thank you for doing all that good work behind the scenes. I'm not sure exactly what that would entail, but I think there's also some really good work that needs to happen with our county counterparts on the messaging and working with our next generation of folks. And I think from the KSI numbers, I think it was pedestrians not yielding to cars was a third most type of incident, right? The first one being speeding and the other one red light. And the third was pedestrians not yielding to cars. I thought it was really going to be the other way around, cars not yielding to pedestrians, but it was really quite opposite. And so I think when we take a look at some of this, there's messaging that, this is a target for our next generation of folks and our current riders, whether they be on bikes or pedestrians or in cars or motorists. But I think there's some value there for all of these top 5 known KSI factors, right? That it'll feed into some effective messaging. So I'm glad we're doing some technical partnership, and I wonder what we can do in terms of bringing some of the resources that the county has. And they probably have plenty of resources, and how we can work with them to either get into the schools together, or maybe working with some of the neighborhood groups that we've already established. A lot of us here already have a lot of neighborhood groups that are established. Whatever the strategy may be, I just think that there's a missed opportunity there with our county counterparts. That was the extent of my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Depp?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that thank you for the report. It's helpful information. I'm glad that we made this report, I think, is it quarterly now? It used to be just annually, and we decided to do it twice a year, 4 times a year, but it's more frequent than it used to be, so it's good to have the updated information. And I think that's a direct result of advocates from the community coming up and asking for that the last time we had this, so kudos to you. I just want to have one question following up on what Councilmember Reyes said, since she flagged that pedestrians failing to yield to cars is the third known KSI factor. What are the rules that we have, if any, for bicyclists? Because I know sometimes you go up to a stop sign and you don't want to lose momentum, so you just kind of slow down and just kind of go through. I mean, is that at any all related to this? Because I see that sometimes, and I understand, why would you stop if you don't need to? But then there's a stop sign. So, you have any comment on that?
David Tyndall, Deputy Chief, Bureau of Field Operations. Just in regards to the bicycles, I mean, yeah, I'm sure you've seen a lot of bicycles around town. Some follow the rules of the road, some do not. When you're riding a bicycle, you're just like a car out there in regards to following and obeying all vehicle codes that are out there, which means stopping at stop signs, even if you're in a bicycle lane. So sometimes those fatalities can be as a result of failure to yield, and they roll through intersections and cars don't see them. Obviously, bicyclists are a little harder to see, and especially at night times. And so it's why we always push for the lights and reflectorized gear that you can wear, as well as helmets. And also, and even in regards to helmets, a lot of our adult bicyclists don't wear helmets, and certainly if they're hit by a car, being elevated in an elevated position, being hit by a vehicle, we see a lot of head trauma as a result of that.
Sure. All right, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Councilmember Perales?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, staff, for the presentation, and thank you to all of our community members who came out, specifically family members of those that we are speaking about today, and helping to, I think, bring some names and some real people to this report. I actually really appreciated that aspect, and I think during our last report, which was an annual report, I don't know if it was Walk San Jose or not, but I believe there was an organization that came up and actually listed off the names of individuals that had been killed in the prior year. And I think just the idea of having an individual's name read out in recognition that we aren't just talking about statistics here, I think that is important. And I actually had another question for you anyways, Nikita, so maybe I can ask you to come on down and I'll ask you that question. And then you can answer if it was your organization that helped us with that or not last time. Hi, thank you for being here. Do you know if it was your organization that helped with that last time? It was.
With a group of volunteers as well.
Okay, so I know that we, this is not going back to the full council, at least not yet. I wanted to see, hang out just a sec. For staff, when are we going to come back to this committee, and then when ultimately will we be cross-referencing this for another report, maybe at the full council?
It is planned to be cross-referenced to full council.
This item today?
Yeah, the date, what, is
Yeah,
it January?
Yeah.
Okay.
When the staff still has some final work to do on the plan itself, take feedback in today, take community feedback, and then probably after the first year, bring it back to the council directly.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
so that's the plan. We don't have a cross-reference
So not
date.
immediate cross-reference for
Not an
this.
immediate, but there's still some finalization due to the plan, and then bring it to the council after that point in time.
Thank you. So then, Nikita, what I would love is if you would help us with that again, and when this actually comes to the full council, if you wouldn't mind, and staff, if you can be sure to partner with our organization, and then either it's part of our presentation for staff, or if we could give Nikita or the community members the opportunity without them having to utilize their 2 minutes of public speaking, I'd love to be able to incorporate that into the presentation of the full council. So that's the first aspect of it, and thank you for helping us with that the last time. In regards to the question I have for you, which is on your website, there's a statement here where it says, still San Jose remains the largest city in California without a dedicated staffed walk advocacy organization. Do you mean a nonprofit organization that sort of works independently on their own and then can support the city? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, so my program was kind of born out of that need, recognizing that the pedestrian fatality rate in San Jose is disproportionate to the rest of the country. We're at about, I think Jesse said 46% in 2018. The rest of the country is, although on the rise, still around 16%. So my program started officially in 2017 as a program within CalWalks to address that.
Yeah, noticing that on the website, it looks like Walk San Jose is the only organization under the umbrella of CalWalks. Is that true? Under CalWalks, under the...
Yeah, we are, CalWalks has just one city-specific program, and that is Walk San Jose, yeah.
Okay. That's, I just wasn't fully aware of how that worked.
Yeah,
and reading that in here helped me to understand. And first off, thank you for CalWalks and then yourself in helping to fill that void. I hope that I was looking at some of the others, like you mentioned, there's the San Diego model. They're not called Walk San Diego anymore, though.
Yeah, but they're, Walk SF, Walk Bike Oakland.
And those are
Walk Long
fully
Beach.
funded, staffed organizations?
Yeah, with staff larger than one, which is what we have right now.
Yeah, which is you.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you, first off, for what you're doing, and to the program, CalWalks, again, for helping to fill that void. I do think that certainly that we see the reality and the need here, and this isn't going to be just a, city Department of Transportation driven effort, a police department, right, to fill that void, or any individual nonprofit or elected official for that matter. It really is going to take a collective whole, and I think when we look at what we're lacking across the board, right, it's from things like this, like a fully staffed independent, body that's sort of helping to advocate for safe walking, bicycling, the screen that we have up above us, right, for a fully staffed, sufficiently staffed traffic enforcement unit. So there's a lot of different areas where we need to focus on, but I appreciate that you're here for that, and thank you. That was the only question I had, but thank you for being willing to help present those names when this comes to the full council.
Thank you.
Thank you. So to my colleagues, I did submit a memorandum, and I'll describe sort of what I'm talking about here. I don't know if my constituent Paul is still here, but I want to say thank you to him as well for coming out. I know it's difficult sort of at the last minute when you're notifying some people to be able to come out. He was one of the individuals that showed up at our community meeting, and I'm assuming he took some time off today, just like probably a number of you, to be here in the middle of the day. So thank you to him and to the rest of you. So the item or the memorandum that I have talk about three different things. One of them in regards to just looking at the scope of the data analytics tool, and I appreciate the feedback from some community members that talk about maybe a disinterest in spending money or time on a consultant. I differ with that opinion, and I do think that it's really important that we do get one, in regards to this data analytics tool, that we have something that is really refined and that we actually can understand what is happening out in our city versus just the anecdotal or even the reports that we get, as we've determined, that are insufficient from the police department that we would think would be the best that we have. But clearly, right, we are not necessarily analyzing everything we should be. So that's where I think this will help. My interest there, just in regards to looking at the future growth and then specifically some of the socioeconomic impacts. If staff wanted to respond, you could. Otherwise, I'll kind of go through the list. So, and I'll look to John without a nod. I'll continue down. So the second one, in regards to the $300,000 we're talking about for new staffing, and then the work that staff member will do in regards to outreach and engagement, I'm actually suggesting a different approach, and this is sort of along the lines of what Councilmember Arenas was talking about. I do think that, and you gave a good example, Councilmember Arenas, of sort of like marketing strategies and some that are really effective. I'm not going to disagree that there may be something effective with San Francisco, and we may have found it effective here, or maybe we'll yet to see. But in regards to this effort around seniors, I'm not saying that's a bad idea, but I do think that we should have a very well-focused communication strategy, and versus just hiring on a staff member and putting some money towards that. I am suggesting that we go a different route, which is for this sort of coming year with that funding, that we actually get an expert to do this. And so if you want to respond, please.
Yeah, John Risto again, and actually both Councilmember Arenas and the idea presented here, we've talked about that. We agree that we are police officers, planners, and engineers, and we're not messaging communications experts when it comes to marketing. And the example given with Don't Mess with Texas has been enormously successful, and then permutations on that. For us to get some of this across, we need some help with that. That is where professionals in that sort of marketing and how to communicate with people is extremely beneficial to us, since we don't do that. So the idea that we would have some help to create a strategy of how to do that and what that message could be, and how to communicate that to the most people and to the people that we need to communicate to, we think it's a great idea.
So what would that actually look like then in regards to the direction moving forward, based on what was in your memorandum that talks about hiring a staff member?
I would
and
think
utilizing
this
those
is like
funds?
a first step. We would probably want to scope out what that assistance would be in terms of having somebody that's more of a marketing expert, or somebody that can help us to message and develop a campaign. The reason why we took the easy approach with using the San Francisco version that Jesse mentioned was San Francisco did a similar thing, that they actually put quite a bit of money into trying to focus group and market a campaign. Maybe it's not the best for us down here, but that same effort, I think, is needed for a very big area that we have in the city of San Jose, and most likely the entire county. So I think it would be something that we would probably put a scope together for that work. And then continuing on, we would then have some staff and other assistants, a multi-department way to actually implement that strategy. It would be something that we'd probably need to do first and then continue.
Okay, and I do think it would be beneficial too to see how we couldn't leverage, maybe Measure B dollars. I know VTA just did, and I mentioned that in my memorandum. Some of their marketing that they've recently embarked on and invested in, but across the county, to your point, right? Could we not maybe invest in something, especially since we're talking about, right? It's marketing. It could be used essentially anywhere.
Right.
We just kind of stole the hard work San Francisco was doing. It's a great idea, right? So could we not maybe incorporate and partner with the county to help fund some of that, that initial analysis?
What you're probably referring to is within the bicycle pedestrian program of Measure B, there is a small set aside on an annual basis for community engagement outreach, similar to what I think this could be. VTA hasn't released that yet for this current fiscal year, so they are about ready to come out with the capital program and then the planning funds that you're referring to. So certainly, I think it's a competitive program for the countywide and then within what the city can compete for. So it is a source that we could go after, and I think that would be a perfect one for us to address.
Okay, thank you. In regards to the next recommendation, and we see it on the slide up above, with the traffic enforcement unit, there was one sort of discrepancy that I found when I was doing some of this research, which I noted in my report, which was that our budget for the last 3 years has actually had an adoption of 48 positions, which included 40 officers, 7 sergeants, and 1 lieutenant. So in looking at your report, I was looking at the 24, which is actually an allocation of 31 for 24 officers, 6 sergeants, and 1 lieutenant. And so I was just kind of scratching my head trying to figure out what was going on there. And we reached out to the police department and did determine that, I guess, this may have been a recent shift in the allocation. And so I wanted to see if you can speak to that, and then we'll kind of continue on from there.
Yeah, I know our CFO, Lisa Perez, was currently working with staff in regards to those positions. I do know that from the 40 officers, those positions were shifted down to 24 in TEU. I don't know the exact numbers, but I know that some of that staffing went to our SWAT team. They went to training in the police academy. Again, as you know, we are pushing 3 academies through a year right now, and we sorely needed staff out there to be able to handle the large groupings of academy recruits that are coming through, both from the training standpoint and the academy standpoint. And I know that some were also prioritized out in other critical areas. So she's currently working with staff right now to get those numbers solidified into you so that the adopted budget can be made.
Do you know when those decisions were made? Were those recent decisions, or was this a couple years ago, or?
I believe this is within the last year or so.
All within the last year?
Yes.
Okay. And so the reason why that, obviously struck me for 2 reasons. One, just looking at the staffing, and the chief knows this. I was arguing with him over the summer, and ultimately he did allocate a couple more TEU officers, and I appreciate that added allocation, because when we heard this report 6 months ago and we saw where the numbers were at, that was the first time I had been aware personally of how low we had actually gone, and so hence I started advocating wherever I could to see how we could get those numbers back up. What I didn't know at the time was that we had this allocation of the 40 officers within the budget for the past 3 years. And it wasn't made readily clear that there were, granted, I know that we're understaffed within the police department, so that it's not that it's a surprise that we may not necessarily have all units filled, but it wasn't readily clear that how far sort of below the allocated staffing we were in TEU. And even though it sounds like maybe within this past year we have made some shifts in the actual bodies, it doesn't necessarily explain the last 2 years and the fact that we've had this allocation of 48 adopted positions, 40 officers, and what, and why we were maybe so deficient in regards to TEU. And I would like to, as you compile some of that info, that's helpful to see where they're gone. But I do think when this comes back to the full council, I would like, and if the chief will be here, I imagine he may for that presentation, if he can describe as to why, why some of these decisions are being made in regards to the allocated bodies that we have, and let's say that it's no longer the 48 and the 40 officers, it's now the 31 and the 24 officers, and I'm fine with if that's the numbers we're working with. but why are we not necessarily filling those positions, right? So where have they gone, and then why are we still deficient in those areas? And the reason I bring this up, and certainly there's a lot of areas, and I'm asking the chief all the time, right, for added prostitution stings right along Monterey corridor, right, because of it's a high need and a big demand from my community. So it's not, I don't go without asking the chief for sort of that more support, and I do agree with some of our community members that spoke to, right, we know we need just more officers in general. But while we are still, sort of understaffed and we need to allocate them intelligently, I would like to understand this better, because I do see this as a really huge community need. And when you hear from some of the individuals and they're talking about the actual lives lost that we're looking at here, and I can't say the map that we're looking at, right, is that a 100% one-to-one correlation, right, that, well, we dropped TEU officers and so thus that's why the numbers have gone up. We can't say that definitively, but we can say, right, and even in statistics, as my chair will denote, this trend, right, is telling us something. And so there's absolutely a correlation. And so we can't deny that. And we have now enough years of data to say, all right, clearly this is a factor. This isn't an anomaly, right? And so I do think we need to be fully staffed at a bare minimum at the 24 officers that we have allocated, and I'd like to know when we can actually get there. To however many of those sort of questions and allegations that I've made at the moment, if you want to answer, please. Otherwise, what I'm looking for is a more robust sort of, I guess, response or presentation from the chief when this comes back to the council. But anything you feel like you wanted to add in now, please.
Certainly. So what I can speak to is when we were at the height of TEU and we had those positions in there, namely 7 sergeants, 40 officers, and 1 lieutenant. At that time, we were close to 1,500 officers or 1,500 sworn at the San Jose Police Department. Obviously, we dropped considerably from then, and from that, a number of different both bureaus and units across from field operations to investigations to internal other administrative duties fell down in numbers. As we continue to grow, obviously we are putting through 3 academies per year. We're now getting up to the numbers that we have, and each time we do that, and actually the chief just asked again for another assessment, which we're roughly doing every 4 to 6 months right now, an assessment on where staff going to go. As we bring recruits in and as they graduate from the academy, we offset our retirements. We see how many we have essentially bodies left from that point, and then we start plugging in holes. So we're actually doing that again as we speak. Assistant Chief Knopf asked for it at our meeting last Thursday and said he wants an updated one, and that is an updated document that gives prioritization on where these officers, as they start coming out of academies, where we're going to start plugging in those holes. Again, I do know that from these prioritizations, patrol still continues to be our #1 priority, getting officers out in the streets who are handling those 911 calls. And then above and beyond that is when we start backfilling things like special operations, traffic investigations, traffic enforcement, and all our investigative bodies.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I know that in our last council meeting, we discussed the topic of fireworks and enforcement of fireworks. And although it was frustrating, I know some of my constituents, I agreed with the chief, right, that there are prioritizations that he has to make and come, especially this coming 4th of July, and I think it's a Saturday night, right? Right, there's a reality behind what we can actually do with the bodies that we have. And we just have to accept that at times, and especially while we're still understaffed. So I understand that, and I know it's not an easy task that you all have, which is to allocate these bodies in places that we know we just need many more. This one's just a glaring number, and I think it's just way too low. So I'm hoping we can continue to increase it. Again, I thank the chief for being able to do that over the summer. And I do hope we can continue to see that increase as we've seen these academies coming in, and hopefully we can get much more over the 1,100 officers that we have and get back to the 1,400 officers that we had 10 plus years ago and beyond that. The last 2 points, I didn't denote this on my memo, and I'll move my memo momentarily, but the allocation of the resources. This is action item 6, prioritize limited resources on KSI reduction strategies. Staff, are these resources you're talking about limited to the 17 priority PSCs? Now I'm saying acronyms because I'm seeing too many of them. Yeah, the corridors. Priority safety corridors. I'm blanking.
When we're referring to that, that's what we're referring to as the priority safety corridors.
Priority safety corridors. Thank you for helping me there. So you're talking about the funding just in regards to those areas. So, and you'll see in my memo I denoted this as well, that when we look at the traffic calming funds that each district gets allocated, it's an even split, so equal, if you will, across the city with $200,000 that we're looking at to do some traffic calming measures. What I would hope is that, for one, at least in the upcoming equity study session, that this is one of those areas, and this is just another one that sort of has come to my attention, and I think numerous ones will continue to, as we look at how we can be more equitable with our distribution of dollars. This is one of those areas that's glaring to me when you look at the districts 3, 5, 6, and 7, in where clearly, right, the needs are not being met. Granted, it's across the whole city, but here, I think it's so glaring, but yet we have the simple distribution of funds in regards to the traffic calming dollars. So I know you're talking about something a little different in regards to the priority safety corridors. I would like to see actually both of sort of those dollars be allocated in a similar way, where we're directing them to these areas, sort of following the data, right, as I denoted there, and as you did as well. So I appreciate that you're mentioning that in your report. I would just ask, I don't know which, if it's going to be yourself participating in the equity study session, but I would like to have that be part of that conversation as well.
Yep, we'll be applying equity to everything that we do in the city, so I think this certainly fits right into that.
Okay, thank you. And the last thing, I know that one of the community members spoke in regards to the 17 priority safety corridor areas. I did find it on the website. I don't know if it's very easily denoted, that it doesn't say that there's 17. It's sort of a map of blue lines. So maybe there's a way that we can make that a little bit more clear to people. And then in the report, I did notice that we referenced 17 and then 15. So it is 17, correct?
There's 17, but 2 of them are county facilities that
okay.
we're
So that's
really,
what
they're all wholly within the city of San Jose, so they're important to us, but they're actually county facilities.
Okay, maybe even that then as well in the map, right? And then some sort of explanation that talks about the 17 / these 2 that are in the county. And so then I'll make a motion to move my memorandum.
Second.
Thank you.
Councilmember Esparza?
Yes, thank you. First off, I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to come up. I know that this has been deeply personal, and I appreciate all the speakers coming today to speak and share their stories. So thank you. I actually appreciate the way that the memo was laid out. One of the things that we have brought up, I think in the last meeting when we talked about this, was the need for additional data. And so I appreciate that that's how this starts off. With that data, and not just the data that may or may not be in the police reports, but then the next layers of data about the incidences, so that we can begin to have a deeper understanding of the circumstances of that. So I wanted to say thank you for that. I did want to also agree with my colleague, Councilmember Arenas, in talking about the task force. I appreciate that California Walks, is Nikita still here? Yeah, there she is. And Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition, AARP, are brought up, but I think our schools have very strong relationships with neighborhood residents, and they're really a key hub in the communities that they're located in, and to really try and find a way to incorporate the perspectives of residents. And whether it's some folks from some of our city commissions or from some other county commissions or some of the VTA advisory councils, that we find a way to incorporate the perspectives of regular people, especially people who live and work in some of these areas, who can give that perspective. On the marketing component, you know, I have seen so many people literally crossing the street, stop, look at their phone, halfway through the intersection, respond to an email, and then look up and look around and say, oh, and realize they were halfway through an intersection. And I know some cities are starting to go back to that age-old stop, look, and listen marketing that apparently I grew up with, but I'm old, so maybe not everybody's growing up with that anymore. But something as basic as stop, look, and listen, people aren't doing it. So I just wanted to bring that up. I actually wanted to focus a little bit on, at the very end of the memo, District 7. I mean, this is not a list anybody wants to be at the top of with the, I mean, it's terrible. And District 7 is unfortunately very high on fatalities and severe crashes, and it's heartbreaking. But a lot of these are on major corridors, Tully, McLaughlin, Monterey, Center. And one of the things that these major arteries have in common is that they are arteries that have not had the capital investment that other major arteries in the city have had. And so I wanted to just point that out. It might be super obvious, but this is part of the equity discussions that we've been having in the city. And I know DOT knows this because we have some Vision Zero projects planned in these areas, but the fact that it took so long as a city, and not through anybody here, but as a city, that it took so long to get to some of these intersections where we do have fatalities. You know, this is the kind of infrastructure that has been lacking in District 7, and I have told the DOT team sort of privately, but I'll say it publicly, we had a fantastic project on Lucretia. You know, I'm not a transportation engineer, and everybody's telling me here's all the data, and even with just striping, and here's how we can do it, and it worked. It really did. It was a simple thing with striping and bicycle lanes, and you know, knock on wood, but traffic has slowed. The other day, I actually saw a gentleman out on his bicycle, like not going to work, but just kind of tootling about, which was something I hadn't really seen that much at that time of day. And so I just really wanted to say that, even though it's very obvious. I wanted to go back to the traffic enforcement unit issue and point something out. If we could go back to the slide where we have the graph. So there's something else that happened that we can point out. And in 2012, the city passed something called Measure B, which decimated city staff, including our police force. And so we lost a lot of police officers and a lot of wonderful city staff, although we were able to keep some. But that's another sort of number that stands out at me. And so we're now in 2019 in the position of having to sort of prioritize what we need. And I support my colleagues' motion to come back with a plan on how to increase staffing. But I guess my question to you is, how do you increase staffing for the traffic enforcement unit when we need officers in the street crime unit, in the gang task force, and in other life-saving units? How do you do that? What is your plan? Or I mean, you're going to come back to us with a plan if we vote on this motion, but can you talk a little bit more about that?
Thank you for your question, and I guess the simple answer is not very easily. Again, it's why when we start looking through the numbers that we're getting, and for us, everybody counts. when we look through and do an analysis on where these officers are going to go, we go down to the very bodies, not groups of bodies. Again, we have not increased TEU since 2010. We just added 4 officers and Lieutenant David and I here, and we've not had a lieutenant in that position for many, many years. So we absolutely realize the fact that we need to start putting bodies back in positions that we lost in 2012 and around that whole era. But we have to do it obviously systematically with other places we have, like street crimes that you talk of, investigations where we know we sorely need bodies. And our prioritization has been, up until this point, mostly revolving around people crimes. Crimes against victims, violence against victims. And as we continue to get these bodies back, and as we continue to grow, you know, as retirements slow down, we know that back in the early 90s, there was a lot of hiring of police officers that made them retirement eligible. And so as we start offsetting those numbers and as those numbers start evening out, then we will see our bodies continue to grow, and then we can start placing them. And again, that's why we are, you know, we're not pushing this out for a year, 2-year, 5-year study on where we can put these bodies as we get them. It is almost every time we get an academy class out, every, you know, what ends up being every 4 or 5 months, we look at individual bodies and where we might place those. So it is difficult. It is, you know, every unit commander that we have is clamoring for bodies, and rightfully so. We would like to get back to the position where we have a surplus. I think we're a long way from there. But traffic enforcement is certainly, and again, there was no other unit when we did this last go-around that got the amount that TU did. However small it was, that was a big win for them, but we're not done. We need to continue doing it, and we will.
Thank you. And I also wanted to actually thank you. This year we passed a street racing ordinance, which was another life-saving measure, and that's staffed completely by overtime. Is that correct?
Yes, either by a collateral. We have a lieutenant who's actually our field training lieutenant who runs that collaterally, and then there's a group that essentially volunteer collaterally to run that program, and then the actual hours themselves are either run on overtime or much of our street racing detail. We will actually carve off a portion of swing shift when Midnights comes out and detail them when we know that we have street racing going on.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I'll just make couple more points related to data. One of the things I'm looking forward to in getting deeper around data is the types of different crashes. One of them I have noticed on some of the detail that I've been able to see in the reports are unfortunately what I think are some of our unhoused residents getting hit by vehicles. And so I just wanted to state out loud that I think it's important to get that level of detail, because the response to that may not be paving a street or building a median. It may be coordinating more with homeless outreach team. It may be coordinating more with homeless encampments. So it may not be sort of a hard construction cost. It might actually be involving other departments in our city to prevent those fatalities. And so I just wanted to point that out, and that as we continue to look at this, that we don't necessarily look at it just from a sort of DOT standpoint, that we do incorporate some other city departments. And I wanted to make my last point, I swear, about seniors. So I was part of the county's senior agenda, which was a year-long comprehensive county plan, or process to develop a plan around county senior services. So one, I think they'd be a good partner for the city, but two, one of the things when addressing anything seniors is that's, I mean, what is a senior, right? Anybody over a certain age. So it's a broad group of people that have within that a variety of different needs and modalities. One of the things I learned, I actually had to move in to be a full-time caregiver to my mother for a couple of years. And as her mobility decreased, her reliance on the car increased. And so that was kind of an interesting experience. And so I would just recommend that as we move forward on the task force or including those kind of perspectives, that we make a little bit of room and not have as many assumptions about the needs of seniors because there's a lot more to that than we think. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim, did you have a comment?
I did, just in terms of kind of collecting all the feedback that the staff has received today and the direction from the committee and the motion, the memorandum from Councilor Perales. I think what the team is going to do is kind of take that in, incorporate it, and bring it back to the full council in the new year, and that'll coincide as we get the budget process going. Because I think the teams are going to look at what they have, but also what they're going to need. I don't think the whole action plan is anywhere near funded. But they'll look at what the revenue projections are going into the budget process, and that information would be incorporated into the plan that the full council would see, what needs to be referred to the budget process, what can be accommodated with the resources that exist within the department. So that's how I'd anticipate we'd bring this back. And kind of on the fly here, John and Dave, does that sound like an approach? So then the council get this in the new year.
That's really helpful because my question was about the timeline for the action plan, and
Yeah.
it sounds like between now and January, we won't, am I right that we won't be taking any action on the action plan steps? Because it has to be heard by the full council first?
That's correct. I would imagine the staff will begin moving on the things that they're kind of within their current kind of level of activity, but kind of forming the task force, allocating resources to different units, getting the funding to do the marketing campaign that was talked about significantly. I think those things need to be assessed. What can be handled within the existing budgets and what will need additional resources, and that would be identified at that point in time.
Okay, so we'll know in January kind of what you can do before July.
Yeah, and what the plan also has in it is that the staff would come back to the committee 2 times a year, but through the task force, the full data review would happen 4 times a year. So it's actually kind of more kind of communication and work on this than was previously suggested in May when this item was kind of set up, if you will.
Right, I appreciate that. One thing that was discussed by some of the community members, and I do want to thank the community for coming out and for recognizing the gravity of the situation and the need for us to all be part of the solution. One of the things that was brought up was how the community will be represented on the task force and whether there will be representatives from nearby the priority safety corridors or people who have been impacted by pedestrian either fatalities or injuries. How do you envision that happening? And I don't know if that question is for Jesse or Sean.
Well, the way we're envisioning the task force now is really more of the departments, agencies, and organizations that are really involved in development and implementation of safety and health-related impacts of a Vision Zero program. What comes out of that task force of actual concrete implementation ideas, whether it be education or whether it be real projects that we're going to be putting into areas, then I think that's when the involvement and community engagement for those types of groups would really kick into gear in terms of how they're going to be part of development of what that project is. But the task force is really going to be driving data and decision and programmatic actions that we want to have the technical people working on that are in those agencies. So that's the idea with that task force right now.
That makes sense, and I appreciate the data-driven approach. I think that helps us to focus our efforts and our dollars where they can do the most good and make the biggest impact. So I appreciate that, and I support that. And I think that's really the reason for the data analytics tool. It's not to spend money that we could be spending elsewhere. It's really just make sure that whatever dollars we're spending in the place where it can make the biggest impact and decrease the greatest number of KSIs. The other thing I wanted to comment is about the citywide outreach and engagement and education strategy. I just want to say that I think it's important to use not just billboards and buses and traditional modes of advertising, but I think, and Jim and I talked about this in my briefing last week, what we have learned is that there are many different avenues for social media, and they're almost segmented by age. And so that's one of the things I just want to throw out there, is that even seniors are using Facebook, and they're actually ages 40 and up are the biggest group of users on Facebook. And then you've got Twitter, which is a slightly younger group, and Instagram, which is a younger group. And then even younger than that, my kids don't use any of those except sometimes Instagram, which is not that cool for a 14 and a 15-year-old. But that's right, they're on TikTok. Very good. So using all of the forms of social media that are available to us and advertising on them is a really good way to get a lot of eyes on our campaigns, whatever they may be. And we can basically almost segment them by age, by the different social media platform. So that's something I just want to throw out there for the consultant. I do think getting going with a consultant, if that's something we can do before January, let's get that going, because it's really important. No one's hearing from us about this issue. The other thing I wanted to talk about, and members of the public mentioned it, talking about measurable goals. So what can we do with our action plan versus our unconstrained? The unconstrained is basically what would it take to get to zero, but what is our action plan? How far is that going to get us? And having the task force actually not just look at KSIs, but what are our goals, and are we getting there? And what can we do in a year and 2 years? And how far can we get toward zero while we're working on our unconstrained plan? And then the other thing is the last thing is kind of more specific. And I think this question is for Jesse. Someone mentioned the Kurtner light rail station lighting and the fact that there have been 2 pedestrian fatalities in the same area. Can you speak specifically about that location, or is that something you can look into, that specific location?
I can attempt a slight answer to this, is that locations like that are really complicated because that is outside of ETA area, it's under a highway, it's on a city street. It's an issue of wayfinding, it's an issue of lighting, it's an issue of clarity of marking. It's like there's so much complexity in a location like that, but I don't want to make it sound like that makes it like something we can't do. I think it's just a great example of something that takes a lot of cooperation. A lot of people here know that I came from another city and worked there before I came here, and I did work on locations like that there. So I personally think that they're possible to do, but they're challenging locations to do, and they're,
I agree, and I understand that. It also happens to be a district boundary, so I know it's tough you'll have to work with both my office and Councilmember Esparza's office, but that's something that we can help with those cross-jurisdictional areas. I have multiple in my district, and we've kind of gotten good at figuring out how to get everybody around the table. And if we need to do that at this spot, then let's work together to get that going and figure out what we can do, what we can throw dollars at, and then what we need to sort of beg from the other agencies to do. Thank you. And then that kind of leads, I just had a question about that lighting more generally. And it's because it came up this weekend. I was in one of the neighborhoods in my district that doesn't have any streetlights, and they're just residential neighborhoods, but they don't have any streetlights for whatever reason, going back many years in history. Do we have a plan? I know we're replacing all of our existing streetlights with LEDs. Do we have a plan for lighting the areas that are underlit in the city? And it's related to this issue, I think you know. So even though it might not be a priority corridor, we have a visibility issue in some parts of our city where there just are not streetlights.
Yeah. John, I'm happy to take it if
Yeah,
you want
well,
me to, or go ahead.
both of us. We do not have a plan for that, but I think it goes with what we want to do is actually, we have a lot of areas that don't have sidewalks. What we do want to do this next year is start a pedestrian plan for the city that are starting to cobble together funds for that. That would include, what do we have to do to add sidewalks that are not in neighborhoods right now, connect up gaps, and then that includes potentially lighting those areas that are unlit. Unfortunately, a lot of these areas came at when the city incorporated county pockets that came without those things. So we don't currently have a plan, but maybe Jim has a larger
We
answer to that.
don't. What we do is we keep a request list. So there are numerous neighborhoods that have either no lighting or inadequate lighting, and Public Works keeps that list. But given the realities of funding in our Transportation and Traffic Capital Program, we've not been able to move on that. Just maintaining what we have and addressing kind of, the critical issues has been the focus of the funding. So there just has not been the funding to do that. Probably it starts with, like John said, a pedestrian priority plan and assessing kind of what it would take, what types of, like the unconstrained resource information that you asked for here. And then how do we begin to go about chunking the highest priority on that unfunded need list? Right.
Well, while we're on the subject of lack of sidewalks, I know both West San Jose and East San Jose have areas, just because of where I've been and where I've lived in the city, that don't have sidewalks because they were incorporated at a time when I guess we had already built our sidewalks and county hadn't. But do we have a comprehensive list of which areas do and don't have sidewalks and which areas do and don't have streetlights?
Yeah, I would say we definitely have information about that. Do we have every street documented? I'm not sure of that, but certainly we know which areas came into the city, and I think we have a pretty good handle on where we lack sufficient sidewalks and lighting. So I think we have a pretty good handle on it. Do we have every street charted in our GIS system? I don't know about that. John, you may have.
No, yeah, we don't have that specific. That's what we're intending to do with the sidewalk plan, is actually map it out. So we know where they are, cost it out, figure out what it's going to take to do this. So, but we do not have that complete, specific street by street list.
Okay. Well, I think it's a good start to get it mapped out, which I know we've been kind of systematically doing it with different parts, and starting with, I think we mapped out all the Public Works has done a lot of mapping in the last few years, so I appreciate that. All right, any other comments from my colleagues? All right, then, on Councilmember Peralez's motion, all in favor? Aye. And that motion carries, and that will be cross-referenced to the full council in January. Thank you all. And we will move on to item 3, City-Generated Tow Services Delivery Model Report.
afternoon, Chair Davis and Council Committee members. I'm Rachel Roberts, Deputy Director with Code Enforcement, and I'm here with my colleagues, Jennifer Chang, Deputy Director of Finance, and Captain David Santos with the San Jose Police Department. And we're here today to present to you the status report on the city-generated tow services delivery model. So in January 2019, City Council accepted the city auditor's audit of towing services, as well as administration's response to address all 17 audit recommendations. City Council also directed staff to return to T&E in the fall of 2019 with a proposed tow service delivery model and provide a status report on the vehicle abatement audit. Council also directed staff to consider various factors in the development of the new model, such as accessibility of the tow yards for our customers and securing a heavy-duty vehicle tow operator for larger vehicles such as RVs. So taking into account input from City Council and the audit recommendations, the history of the tow services in San Jose, as well as the current challenges in providing our tow services, staff identified 3 guiding principles to drive the development of the new model. 1, to develop a service delivery model that is responsive to the neighborhood, residents, and customers. 2, to ensure that the model is financially feasible and sustainable for tow operators. And 3, to develop a modernized and efficient system of operation for the city that also limits the financial impact to the city budget and resources. So following the January City Council meeting, staff got to work and developed the tow audit work plan, and also the multi-department working group, which included representatives from Code Enforcement, Finance, City Attorney's Office, the San Jose Police Department, DOT, and the City Manager's Office. The working group had made significant progress over the past 10 months in accomplishing the work plan goals. Staff conducted research through benchmarking of 11 jurisdictions throughout California, including San Diego, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and the California Highway Patrol, to evaluate the elements of these other city tow service delivery models. So we've also provided as attachment in the report the highlights from the findings of that research and the preliminary staff conclusions of each of those key elements that we evaluated. Staff also released 2 contingency requests for proposals to attempt to secure a backup tow operator to address tow refusals in the interim. However, we did not receive any bids on either of those 2 RFPs. Staff also conducted a request for information to elicit more information from both the tow operators and the third-party administrator software companies in the industry. And this was a bit more successful in that we did receive 1 collective response from San Jose Towers, which is the association that represents our current 6 tow operators, as well as from 5 software companies, which each provided a response. As part of the RFP and RFI, staff also conducted follow-up meetings to ask clarifying questions and to get additional information from the responses that were provided. And this follow-up is still, with the RFI at least, is still ongoing. Lastly, staff addressed some key audit recommendations in whole or in part through the Second Amendment to the tow agreements and the update to the Council Policy 9-8 rate review process for tow car services. So one of the key challenges that staff has encountered in developing this new service delivery model has been finding the balance between the context and conditions with which the current tow system is operating and the guiding principles that we're working to try and achieve through this process. So currently, the tow providers are experiencing reduction in claimed vehicles, rising tow and disposal costs, an increase in RV tow requests, among other key factors. Additionally, conditions such as poor data and tracking and lack of technology have made drawing meaningful conclusions to make recommendations for improvements very difficult. We've also found that the system in many ways is interconnected, where one aspect of the system will in turn affect another. For example, making improvement in one area, such as the financial feasibility in reducing the contract compensation fee to operators, may adversely impact the ability for the city to provide full reimbursement of disposal costs. So finding solutions that address all these factors and achieve our guiding principles has been difficult and, needless to say, very complex. Sorry. Okay. Staff has also gained some key insights from the development of this new model. From results of the contingency RFP and the feedback we received from the tow industry, staff has learned that the contingency backup towing is very costly and not viable for the tow operators under the current system. We've also learned that technology and software is central to reliable data, performance tracking and reporting, and the automation of processes, and that a balanced and sustainable financial model is vital, and that finding viable solutions is difficult and complex and requires a multi-step process. So putting all these pieces together, the council direction, the audit recommendations, the research, the outcomes of the RFPs and RFIs, the identified challenges and complexities, and the insights that we have gathered through the process, staff has developed the proposed tow services delivery model framework, which is made up of 4 key components: technology and software-based platform, a third-party administrator, a model that is financially balanced and sustainable, and modified contract terms and performance standards. So as depicted on this diagram before you, I'll quickly go over each of these sections. So we're looking at the technology and software-based platform because we believe it would provide the much-needed automation of our tow process from tow to the release of the vehicle. It would provide for process streamlining. It would improve our data tracking and our performance monitoring. And it would provide a web-based user interface that could be used by the city and operators alike. Utilizing a third-party administrator would provide management and oversight, coordinate the efforts of the contracted tow providers, provide a 24/7 customer support, and a customer website where customers would be able to track and find their vehicles as well as pay fees. And it would also provide the city with regular reporting and billing and invoicing that we don't currently have electronically. A financially balanced and sustainable model will provide for fully cost recovery administrative fees, a viable reimbursement program when it comes to reimbursing for the junk vehicles and disposal costs, and proper contract compensation fees that can be supported by data. And then the modified contract terms and performance standards. We are looking to do modified contract terms and performance standards with the existing six operators, which would provide first right of a refusal to those 6 tow operators that are in good standing. It would include modifying zones to make them more equitable and efficient in terms of service delivery. It would move some of our current standards to more of a performance-based model. It would establish an escalating contract breach penalty structure, and we would be revising our backup tow process to ensure that it is effective. And as you can see, I did highlight the financial piece in green, and that is just to draw your attention to the fact that this is one key piece of this framework that is still under development and is going to need further evaluation before we can arrive at a permanent model to put into place. So staff is recommending that we implement this framework through a pilot program with a contracted third-party administrator that will also provide a full-service technology platform at the core of the model. The pilot program would allow the city, the environment, and the flexibility to test and refine the proposed model in partnership with the third-party administrator and tow operators under modified service agreements. With technology in place, the pilot would also allow the city to automate workflows and processes such as dispatching, gain efficiency in service deliveries in the near term, such as improved response times, and generate dashboards and reports that are much needed. It also, as I mentioned previously, allow us to conduct the billing and invoicing electronically and gather data on true program performance and service delivery costs to inform the sustainable fee structure. And under this pilot program, the city would continue to test, refine, and improve the proposed model as we move through each phase of the pilot. So staff proposes that the pilot be implemented in 3 phases over the timelines as proposed on the slide. And I'd like to note that these phases do overlap and would span between November of this year and September of next year. So the first phase would be the review and the evaluation of all the fees, costs, and budget related to the tow system to determine the appropriate level and balance of fees and the cost between the city, the operators, the third-party administrators, and the customers. And this phase is already underway. The second is the development and issuance of the RFP and the award of contract to a third-party administrator software company. As part of this phase, we recommend that, or staff recommends we report back to T&E in February with the results of the full financial analysis that will come from phase one, as well as the RFP scope and the feedback from the stakeholders prior to the release of the RFP. And then the third phase would be the outreach and negotiations with the existing 6 tow operators leading to the tow agreement amendments. And as I mentioned before, the components of that modified agreement would include the first right of refusal to operators in good standing, the modified zones to ensure fair and balanced distribution in number and type of tows, reduce or eliminate refusals, and establish a system for backup tows, and then address the junk and large vehicle tows in a fair and effective manner. So in summary, we wanted to provide you with some key takeaways for your consideration. The framework has been designed to achieve the balance between the service model and the industry challenges and guiding principles. Contracting with the third-party administrator software company allows the city to retain and improve city oversight, while also setting contract performance standards for the provider, the tech and software provider, and tow operators. It streamlines the process and gains efficiency through automated service delivery. A full evaluation and analysis of fees, costs, and budget is necessary to develop a financially feasible and sustainable model for all. And continuing outreach with operators and software companies will continue to provide valuable insights and inform the model. Amending the tow service agreements will bring more accountability, equity, performance, and service delivery model improvements. And implementing the pilot will allow the city to test the model, gather and evaluate data, track performance, and make meaningful improvements. So with that, staff is recommending that the T&E committee accept our status report on the development of the new tow services model and direct staff to continue to refine the service model and pilot program approach and return to T&E in February 2020 with the final plan for implementation. And that concludes our report.
Thank you. We have many members of the public who would like to speak. Jerry Strangis.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Jerry Stranchis, and I represent the 6 tow contractors in San Jose. So thank you for letting us speak today. First off, the last 6 to 8 months, we've been working very diligently with your very qualified staff. I want to thank Jim and Rachel taking the time to meet with all the tow contractors, going through the 18 items that were identified in the audit, and couldn't be working any better. We're in complete agreement in the staff's recommendation. What we would like, based on the letter that you received from our council, former Mayor Chuck Reed, 2 items that we think we can move forward on quickly. One is the software technology that both staff and the towers want to implement as soon as possible. It's very important. It will make a difference, and the sooner we can get that done, the better. And number 2, the tow contract needs to be financially viable. It is not right now financially viable. 4 of the 6 tow contractors may be out of business by the end of the year. That's the situation we're dealing with. If we can work and get an amendment to work on those 2 items, implementing the software technology and providing financial relief, we've suggested, and staff is, I think, considering it, a simple pass-through of the $59 fee. The city would continue getting it, but we would be able to pass that through to the consumer that's already paying the tow fee. That would provide immediate relief. We think we can do that with an amendment, and we'd like to do that right away. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Kenny Carvalho, and then John Pendleton, and Nick Alongi.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'd like to start by thanking staff, Jim and Rachel again. They've done a lot of work. I mean, they have really, I can't even tell you how much work they had to put into this and to try to understand the industry on top of it with the work they did. So definitely kudos to them, and we are all in agreement. They have worked with us really well and heard us, and they genuinely heard what was going on with the industry and wanted to learn more, and we really appreciate that. We look forward to working with them in the upcoming months to solve all the audit recommendations that came forth, and all the tow companies definitely feel that we can come to an agreement and make this system back where it was several years ago, being basically the model for the country. I mean, our system was absolutely the best, and I believe it still is and can be with just a little bit of work. What we're asking for today is to implement the software program through auto return to help us get quicker dispatching, immediate dispatching to our trucks. And again, much better record keeping, easy data that we can act upon to improve our systems and actually give the officer out there in the field that's requesting the tow the opportunity to see the tow truck on his, computer and have direct communication to quicken the response time, as well as see when the driver's stuck in 5 o'clock traffic like we all have been. Second thing we'd like to ask is that we could charge the $59 administrative fee to the vehicles that do get picked up, so that we can recoup some of our costs back. Not all the cars get picked up. It's well below 50%, but that will help us in the interim while we're working with staff, because financially right now it's we're just having a really hard time, and I don't know that we're going to be able to survive this process financially. So thank you for your opportunity, and thank you, staff. Really appreciate everything you've done.
Thank you. John Pendleton?
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the council for the opportunity to speak today. I'd like to thank the staff for inviting us to participate in the RFI process. I work for Auto Return. I'm one of the founders of the company, and one of my key job is to look after the technology that we use to offer our services all across the country. We offer a collection of a technology platform as well as call center support and a range of professional services. And we do this for 22 law enforcement agencies representing cities, counties, and states across the country. Just real briefly, I think the staff has done a great job analyzing the situation that everyone is faced with here. We're very supportive of the recommendations that the team has made. We were down here on the 15th and had our opportunity to meet face-to-face with the team to talk through our response and to give our perspective on things, and we appreciate that opportunity. At this point, we're just hopeful that at some point in the future we could play a role in helping the city staff, the tow companies, move this forward in a more effective towing process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nick?
Good afternoon. My name is Nick Kalanji. I'm here for Kalanji Brothers and Motor Body. Also wanted to thank the staff for their great work. We have a great kind of sense of teamwork going right now, and we really want to keep the momentum going. We're kind of struggling with our disposal costs. They've increased over the last year, and while we've got pilots and such to kind of help us out, our needs are currently outstripping that. So that's what the purpose of the pass-through would be for us. There's also an issue of a need for data, and a system that is centralized that can collect all of this data can help answer some of these questions and help form something that's permanent and long-standing for a future program. We really need some financial relief, and we also feel like the contractors, the officers, and the city staff would benefit greatly from a centralized dispatch management platform. Thank you.
Thank you. Tessa?
Well, just the two issues that I was dealing with towing, and I have a homeless person that lives on Stockton that I have been trying to support, and she had 2 vehicles towed over by the Valley Medical. So the issue that I'm trying to address with council and this issue of towing is that she had the vehicle towed twice. And then she tried to get it out of the DMV, her money got stolen, things like that. And so I'm just suggesting maybe a solution, because it was brought to my attention that she had her vehicle towed twice at the DMV, that when homeless people are living in their vehicles, that we look at that. You know, that we can make an adjustment about that maybe they could tell that somebody's living in there. I mean, it might not be appropriate to this topic, but I just wanted to bring that up so that you would maybe be sensitive to when people are living in their vehicles, and that we make some accommodation to that issue in regards to the towing process. So that was that. And then the other issue was there was on my street, on Villa, they were repaving. So when they were repaving the street, they started blowing their horns so loud, these trucks that were going to start paving, the horns were blowing. I mean, it was like almost like you thought it was World War III, the way they were blowing their horns to let everybody know to get their cars off of the street because they were going to get towed. But they had put out the signs that it was going to be towed. And, you know, they had let everybody know that they had to get off the streets. But because people weren't following the rules, they had to go down our street blowing the horns like it was World War III. And, you know, that's wrong. So I would like to, like I was saying to the drivers, they should tow the vehicles. It shouldn't be like blasting horns to tell people to get off the streets like it's an emergency. We should go ahead and tow. So that was just some other issue about towing that I've come across in my life.
Thank you.
Letting people tow the cars is what we're saying, instead of blasting our neighborhoods with noise.
Blair Beekman?
Hi, I wanted to speak about what Tessa was speaking about at first here today. With tow people here and with yourselves here, you know, it's been talked about here, you know, fairly often that, you know, there needs to be some good homeless policies for people when the things are towed. And I hope you're working on that with the tow companies, and, you know, for ways for people to be able to get their belongings back, and just a good system for that. And it's been a bit disorganized and not fully structured, has been my understanding. I know that Palo Alto and Mountain View have developed really good systems in that regard, and I very much suggest you look into those ideas, and it's really nice stuff. And I guess, you know, just making a good community experience for everyone is the most important goal here, and for everybody to get their stuff when they need it is important, and just to have a good dialogue and conversation about that is important too. So thank you, and I guess good luck with this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Esparza?
Yes. This is a really comprehensive report, so thank you. I know that this has been a tremendous amount of work. And I guess my frustration comes from being District 7, right? It's one of the areas of East San Jose, I believe District 5, and I can't remember if District 8 and 4 are impacted by towing companies not towing vehicles when we ask them to. And so, so I know that a lot of work has gone into this, and there's some really good ideas and innovations, and I'm all for data. And there's a component in here, I think on page 6, that talks about land, right? The fact that the city, we're willing to put up our own land for this effort. And I guess what's missing for me is the accountability. So if we as a city are willing to make some concessions, we're willing to put up our own land, where is the accountability built into these contracts so that items get towed when we ask them to be towed? So who wants that? Is that a Jim question or?
I'll go ahead and start. Yeah, why don't I do that? Councilor, your point is well taken, and I think the negotiations that we're talking about engaging with the companies that want to be part of the solution is to establish very clear accountability provisions in the agreements. We would build upon some of what we have today, but certainly take it to another level. The technology system would give us clarity on precisely where we're at on performance. We also recognize that there's a financial component to performing at a very high level, and that needs to be worked on. So kind of, I think the staff recommended approach between the two departments is to move forward with an RFP for the technology to get the data, and then to work on kind of the costs and fees so we know that we have a fair system that the companies can be able to be responsive and meet the performance requirements, and then upgrade the contracts to be able to kind of meet the performance expectations of our community and our city. So clearly, I think we have to have contracts that are more specific, more precise, have clear accountability, but I think there's some balancing within the system to really have the level of investment and resource in the system to make it viable to respond as consistently as we need the companies to respond.
Because this is due to come back in February and then go to transfer to the PD or transition to the PD in July, correct?
That's correct. That's what we laid out with the audit kind of implementation plan. What we're envisioning is developing the RFP between now and February. And if this committee gives the staff the go-ahead in February, we would immediately issue the RFP for the technology platform and a third-party administrator. In the meantime, immediately, staff will be working on the fees that are charged to both the registered owner who's claiming their vehicle and the tow companies, and the costs associated with kind of running the entire system and what our budget situation is related to this program in the city, and develop kind of a financial model that we will share with the committee in February. So the committee will see our recommended approach to fees, what we're seeing in terms of costs, and if we implement this system, what it means for the city's budget as we move into the budget process. You might remember, Councilmember Esparza, in January of last year, when the audit came in front of council, we had a total tow fee cost of about $590. And there was direction from Councilmember Arenas, Councilmember, that suggested we look, is there a way to make some adjustments to that? We've brought that fee down to $437. But I believe there is probably some room in there to address some of the technology needs and the other needs within the program to really make it sustainable and viable over the long term. So we clearly responded to that piece of the direction, but given that we've reduced the fee, some, $100 and about $50, I think we're going to need to look at that and see, is there some capacity to be able to invest more effectively in the system to know what's happening on every tow, to improve the efficiency of the dispatch system, and to make sure every vehicle is towed and stored that should be. So I think there's a lot in this service model that's going to require investment and accountability on kind of every part of the system. The city's going to need to do it, the tow companies are going to need to do it, and the people who are getting their vehicles towed are going to need to be a part of that solution as well.
Well, I hope we get there too, right? Where every car that's supposed to be towed gets towed. And then the owners have a chance to go and get their vehicle, right? Where all parties have that accountability. I just see that where actually, all those fees were collected for so long, yet these processes are old, they're dated. You referenced, I think, handwritten forms, right? So here, all these fees were being collected, yet those investments in that system were not being made prior to city staff really kind of going in there and issuing RFPs and really kind of digging deep into that. We're being asked as a city, we're providing land. One of the things that is a must for me, again, in District 7, we have a lot of blown out cars. We have a lot of blown out RVs where tow truck operators are refusing to tow them. You know, it was interesting on what was it? What page? It's page 4 of the attachment C, where all the different models in there, right? Where LA's, how their reimbursement, Santa Clara and Mountain View have a separate rotation list for passenger vehicles. Santa Clara maintains a separate rotation and has a very high reimbursement rate that I'm not sure we want to go to. But for me, this is a must. Getting to a point where we develop a system where we as a city are being asked to make a string of concessions and investments, that this must be included in this. Otherwise, I do not see supporting a deeper investment. Do you want to talk about RVs separately?
I can make a,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I have a
Rachel.
comment that will speak to this. So in addition to what Jim shared, part of our process in developing this model going after today will be to I mean, because it really, it's all interconnected, and we have to take kind of an overarching look at all these pieces and find ways to not only make the fees work, but also find solutions to some of the problems they're facing that is causing them to refuse these tows. So it's going to deal with the junk vehicle, the reimbursement. It's going to deal with all those components that all together got us where we are today, but will get us someplace better in the future. Does that make sense?
And I guess I would add to that, to what Rachel just said, is I think we need to go into the negotiation, if the committee gives us this direction, with a very clear understanding. We need performance and we need accountability, and we will also have to figure out what are the right investments to make sure that can consistently happen, that we aren't back in front of this committee, 2 or 3 years from now, with a partial fix. And so we're really trying to think long-term, how do we get the industry in a healthy place, and how do we apply kind of modern technology approaches to this system as well. So I think we can take everything that you've outlined as a must and a priority and have that be a central part of what we're moving forward with and negotiating. I think that's kind of at the center of what we're trying to do in the principles that we laid out. Certainly responsive service delivery was the first kind of principle that we established when we were putting this service model together. You saw that with the 3 different elements. That was the first one we put up there.
Okay.
Yeah.
2 more things. I have Sims Metal in my district. They were working with another company on a pilot for RVs. I'm happy to connect them with the team to see if they can be of assistance. The second thing I wanted to, or the last thing that I'll bring up is around the locations. I noticed in reading the reports that some of the models that were looked at were other cities where it could be within city jurisdictions or close to city boundaries. San Jose is 180 square miles. We're big, we're spread out. And the reason the original model was put in place is because it was so hard for people to get to collect their car that it was creating a lot of problems. And I just don't want to lose sight of that we're really spread out. And we also have people who had their cars towed. They have a responsibility, but let's not make it impossible for them to meet their responsibilities. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Perales?
Thank you. Staff, you mentioned in regards to coming back, I believe it was February, right, to this committee with a recommendation on what, say, what would include a updated fee model. Is that correct? So in regards to the letter from Hopkins and Carly, on the $59 being suggested to be passed through. Is that something that you are going to be considering and bring back in that discussion in February?
Yes, we will be looking at that as part of that evaluation.
Okay, what's the opportunity to do something like that temporarily as a, sort of a stopgap? I don't know how.
Yeah.
I think, how, I guess, I don't know if the issues may be, but it sounds like there's 4 tow operators that are potentially going to go out of business if something doesn't change quickly. So what are the opportunities to be able to implement something but not make it permanent, ongoing, knowing that we will come up with a more comprehensive update in February, but something like a pass-through for this fee?
So currently, the contract compensation fee is set as part of their agreements. So at a minimum, we would have to amend the agreement. But in addition to that, a pass-through fee could be considered a tax, and it would have to be, rather than a fee for service. So we would have to look at the legality of that, because anytime you pass on a fee to a customer, we have to make sure we're doing that appropriately. So it's a little more complicated than at face value, but we will be looking at that, the staff, to figure out if there is anything possible in the interim.
Okay, and so it sounds like there's a bit of work to even determine if that's possible in the interim. How quickly do you think you can come back with an answer on that?
Let me
That's a
add
good question.
to kind of the, Rachel, if you could put up the slide that shows the timing of implementation, I think that would be helpful. If you could go back a few slides. Going back, so Councilor, what we're suggesting here is, you can see these are concurrent processes. We aren't going to do phase 1, then phase 2, then phase 3. We're prepared to go into negotiations with the tow operators now and see if there's any low-hanging fruit. We don't want them to go out of business either. We recognize that, and that's part of the staff recommendation is to give the companies that really want to be part of the solution the first right of refusal to continue with us. And we want to sit down with them kind of right away and see, is there low-hanging fruit that can help sustain them? The contract fee is one example, but our attorney's office has, rightly so, it has to be a legitimate cost recovery fee to be able to be adopted by council. Otherwise, you got to go to the voters to be able to do it. So that research is happening by the attorney's office. But we're going to see what we can do kind of in the meantime to figure that out. If we can't pass it through, there's an obvious impact to the city budget as well. So we've estimated revenues and built the current city budget on that $59 contract fee coming to the city. So any adjustment that we can't pass through will be a direct impact to the general fund, and the council would have to consider that. So we would expect to anything that we find in the first part of our negotiations that is low-hanging fruit and can help sustain them, and city staff feels it's a reasonable adjustment, we would consider bringing that sooner. But we would expect to bring back at the February Transportation Environment Committee, you would see our recommendation around fees, costs, and budget. You'd see that element of the model, and we'd be prepared to go out with the RFP for the technology platform and the third-party administrator, and so you'd see that at that point in time as well.
So realistic to say then that February 2020 is the first time we'd hear back. There isn't an opportunity on an interim, at least I'm not hearing that from you, unless it's something that staff can implement without having to come back to the council for a council decision.
Or if the attorneys come back and said, you have this legal path forward, and in our initial or immediate conversation with the tow companies, we see an urgent need to do that, we wouldn't not come back to the council if we saw a path to do something that we think made sense. If we don't see that, it would be February.
Okay, so you could come back then sooner than February?
We could, but it would be to the full city council, and it would be because we think these adjustments are needed to the agreements themselves. I'm not saying we would get there, but we'll certainly, in good faith, meet with the companies to see, does something make sense that's in the best interests of, again, residents, city, and the tow companies.
Thank you.
Councilmember Arenas.
Thank you, Chair. So I know I was one of the folks who was really concerned about our residents overpaying. And when I sat down with you, Jim, I really understood how this very complex system is beyond, it involves different departments and different amendments or improvements to systems. One of which we worked on, which was the police department and fine-tuning that, and that's how the residents were allowed or given a reduction in those fees. So thank you so much for the work that you've been doing, and Rachel and the team. I know that these are huge steps, and I know that we're not done. I am one of my district is one of the districts that does get impacted by RVs. We have a food max, and that is just a prime area for folks to, if it's not those big rigs, it's those RVs that are coming by and just plopping themselves there, or are at our parks. And so I think these tow companies have their role, it has slightly changed with the times. I think the tow companies, and I'm sorry I'm going to say this, but you're as popular as probably Larry Stone, our tax assessor. But I think there is kind of a shift, right? Because nowadays we look to you to take these RVs out of our neighborhoods, right? To get rid of some of that visual blight and what comes along with that, which is people hanging out in RVs all day and partying and doing all kinds of things that they shouldn't. And so I think it's a service that our neighborhoods need. And I'm not quite sure why it is that, that we have, I never really understood that $59, it feels like a pay to play, but I guess it's cost recovery is what it comes down to. I want to understand just a little bit about how that would work and why it has to go through the attorneys to figure this piece out. If it's part of, if we're changing the system and the system is no longer, that we're not burdened by this system and the system is going to be created to have this third-party consultant take care of all of this administrative responsibility, why is it that we continue to have a role with the $59 fee?
The way the fee is established today, I guess it's akin maybe to a franchise fee that the tow companies pay for the privilege of having the exclusive right to tow those and to charge for the retrieval of those vehicles. I think that's probably the closest analogy I could have in terms of why that fee is established in the way it is. Today, it is not a specific cost recovery fee. If we're going to pass it on directly to the registered owner that's retrieving their vehicle as a direct pass-through, an established council fee, that would require cost recovery. We'd have to go through and identify the various costs that are associated with performing that service.
So we would have to figure out the cost, our cost recovery to change the $59.
We would have to figure out our city costs associated with performing that particular service. That's what we would need to do. There are a number of fees, like the dispatch fee and the tow release fee, where we went through and identified the city work and costs associated with it, and the council has adopted that in the fees and charges document. The one that was reduced that you identified last year, we went through and reevaluated it and reduced the costs associated with it, and were able to charge a lower fee. The $59 fee is not the same type of fee. It's just paid directly by the tow companies to the city, essentially for the privilege of having exclusive access to do all the towing. Nobody else can go and tow these vehicles. They're the only ones that have the right and the access to tow those vehicles. So we have some work to do legally and programmatically to figure out what is the right fee and cost structure associated with the program. And that's what we're prepared to kind of do in detail now, council member.
Okay. And so when you adjust the contract, I'm guessing whatever they're allowed to charge our residents, they can't just decide to increase it by $60
That's
one day,
correct.
right?
That's correct.
They have to, okay.
That's correct. Yeah, the council establishes all the different fee components associated with the total amount that they can charge. Yeah, so that's, it is established by council, and the tow companies have to follow those fees that are set.
Got it. So Jerry, if you could come down and answer a question for me, because it sounds like what staff is recommending is within what I think you said the two items that you were looking for, one of which was the software technology. The other is the adjustment of the contract pass-through of the 59. Is this, I guess I'm wondering, it's not, and you've said really great things about our staff, which I agree, they've been doing some really great work. Is it timeline the one that is not working? I guess I'm trying to figure out what isn't working, because one of the things I worry about, one, towing for our residents, but mainly continuing to have RVs towed away from our parks and from our neighborhoods, which is important to me. And so if that means that we need to support our tow companies, I'm willing to do that, because obviously you represent a small business. And so what I'm trying to figure out is what staff is proposing in line with what you were requesting? Because it sounds like to me it sounds like it's in line. Can you clarify that for me?
Yes, I'll try. We essentially agree with what staff has recommended, and we think they've done a great job. So there's really no disagreement other than the timing. Because of the significant impact to the towers right now, they're losing money every month. So we're really literally trying to see what we can do to improve that situation. The software technology, we think, is an easy one. Staff's recommendation, we agree with, but it won't be implemented until an RFP goes forward starting in July, and that's out quite a ways. John Pendleton, who's here with Auto Return, we can implement a lot of the software technology right now. The tow contractors can contract with Auto Return and start implementing some software technology that will make the system more efficient and save everybody money. Right. So staff has said they would look at that, and we're suggesting we do that, and we do that now. The $59 fee is more difficult, but we're not suggesting the city not get the $59 fee. We're simply saying that the consumer that's being charged right now a fee to get their car towed would actually pay for that rather than the tower. That would provide immediate relief. We think we can do that with an amendment.
Okay.
And we can do that right away.
Right. So is that the soonest timeline in terms of?
Yeah, let me provide some clarification, I guess, how staff is seeing that. On the technology side, we very much think the city ought to be the one to purchase the technology platform and to have that for our city, regardless of who the tow companies are today or a year from now or 2 years from now. We think it's a city technology platform that we should have. And we think the way to do that is to put out a kind of a performance-based procurement. Any company would be able to propose on that, and we award it to the best one that's going to meet the city needs. What Jerry and the tow companies are suggesting is that they identify a particular vendor and they immediately go out and do that. The vendor they've identified seems to be a very good vendor that's providing good service to many cities across the country, but we do think it's something the city ought to retain oversight, because we don't know who the tow companies are going to be kind of year after year, and it's something that the city really needs to understand and have oversight and control over. And we think it ought to be done competitively and let any company that can provide that type of technology or service be able to do that. We understand they're concerned about timing. We laid out for the council when the audit was approved in January, this was about the amount of time it would take. And I think we're kind of following that work plan pretty closely. So I don't think there's a lot of disagreement. There's a few nuances here where we're at on that one. So that's we do agree with the tow companies that that's a fee that should be passed on. There's absolute reasons for cost recovery, so we think that's a legal cost recovery fee that can be passed on to those claiming their vehicles. We think that's a good investment. So on that point, we definitely do agree, but we think it's something the city ought to do through our kind of professional procurement process. On the $59 fee, that's something where, again, we have to figure out, is it legal to do that as a pass-through cost recovery fee, or does it need to be restructured in some way? And there's a city budget implication to it as well. So we're prepared to sit down with the tow companies, negotiate with them, and try and figure out what type of relief valves could be maybe put in place sooner rather than later to sustain them while we try and put the new model, the new pilot program fully in place. If that makes sense, Counselor. I know there's a lot of details in there, but yeah.
No, I get that. What I'm concerned, and here's where I'm coming from. If the tow companies aren't working, that means that our RVs are not getting removed from our neighborhoods, is what it ultimately comes down to, because that's part of the issue that's been happening lately. So that's my concern, and one of the reasons why I would want you to expedite this, but it sounds like you have some kind of strategy to relieve them or the tow companies while this transition is in place. And so I don't know what those are and if you've discussed them.
Well, I would say we have a willingness to sit down to see if we can come to agreement on them. I don't have, sitting here today, I know it's this fee or this item. I think we generally know some of the things that we're going to look at. All the staff members have a number of things that we'd be prepared to look at. I can't sit here today and say, I know it's these three and it's these amounts, though. But yeah.
The willingness is there, and
Absolutely.
so I'm glad to hear that. I'll move the staff report and I'll accept it and include that so that the tow companies and staff can continue to negotiate on those finer details. It doesn't sound like we're there yet, but the discussions can be ongoing, correct? So the other item, which is the $59 item, is something that must go through this process of legal review. So I don't know what else we could do to make sure that the tow companies continue to provide the services that we need. So with that, I mean, I'm going to move the staff report and also include to have some, for staff to continue to negotiate with the group of towing companies to find some relief in the transition period.
He had something he wanted to
say.
I have a suggestion that might also work because it's 55, 45, 40, 60. If perhaps we can get an interim recommendation to not pay the $59 fee to the city on the cars that aren't claimed. All the vehicles that get picked up, we'll remit our $59 fee like we have been, as well as the vehicles that aren't picked up that go to the junkyard for $80 or $100 or whatever, that we not pay the $59 fee on those.
For the ones that don't get
that
reclaimed by their owners who are just...
Right, the RVs, the pickups, the cars, or whatever, the junk that goes to the junkyard, that we not pay a $59 fee in the interim while we're negotiating this, just a short-term interim process.
Right,
You want me to address that?
Yes, please.
Yeah. That type of adjustment would require full council action, so it would require an amendment to their existing agreement. I fully appreciate the challenges that the tow companies are operating under. I definitely want them to continue providing the service to us. I think we need to sit down very soon and kind of go through what opportunities are there. Is it that fee? Is it something else? And then we as staff have to put that in context for the council. If we
Sure.
recommend reducing or eliminating some type of compensation that tow companies pay to the city, you're going to have a corresponding budget impact. You know, so at mid-year or at some point in time,
Right.
that has to be reconciled.
Right.
So it's
Right.
within that context, Councilor, that we'll sit down with them, figure out what makes sense, and if something does, we will absolutely bring that back to the council in the interim before we come back to the committee in February.
Great, so maybe what we could do is cross-reference the item in case you need to, because it sounds like whatever you negotiate, you will need to bring back to the greater council, correct? To get approval from,
We will, but we as staff have the ability through the rules and the agenda process to bring back an amendment to the agreement kind of on kind of each Tuesday if we need that. So if we come to that place, we definitely will be able to do that. We have the ability to do that before February if if we come to a place where we have that recommendation for the council. So I feel like we have that within our purview, certainly based upon the discussion at committee today and the way in which I feel you're framing the motion.
Okay, wonderful. So it sounds like you already have the ability to come back with a cross-reference based on whatever it is that you negotiate, whatever the results are. And I'm not going to pretend to figure out the whole negotiation phase right here on the dais. I think that's left with a good conversation with all of the tow companies. And so I'll leave the motion as is, and then just encourage you to please cross-reference whenever you reach an agreement with the tow companies so that we can either, just figure this out so that they can continue to do the work that they're doing.
Clarification? Can you clarify the motion for me, please?
It's just accept the report and continue to negotiate with the towing companies to figure out what that relief valve is. And I think I'm using, Jim, your phrase.
And I guess I would do this, just kind of in full transparency. In the event we don't feel like we achieve, a mutually agreeable interim solution, we'd probably let this committee know through an information memorandum or something to that effect. I won't, leave this unconcluded until February. If we get to a place where we as staff don't feel like we have a recommendation to make, we'd let you know. I'm hoping that won't be the case. We'll go into it in good faith, but I also want the committee not to just be waiting until February with what's going on. So if we get to a place where we aren't going to bring something to council, but we want to keep this committee informed, we would send you an info memo to that effect so you know where it's at.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you.
Councilmember Diep?
Well, I won't keep this long. I just had one question. I was talking to the team over there. They came to my office, and one suggestion they had was this idea of a pass-on of the fee to let private insurance pay for it. And they were saying that why can't council take some sort of action? But my question to them was, does council even need to take action? So if we charge them a fee of some sort, can't that just be passed on? I'm not saying it should be, but can it be passed on legally to the person whose car is towed?
It depends on what type of fee it is and what is the basis of charging the fee for. What cost is that fee offsetting? That's the key. Certainly it can be passed on to insurance companies, but regardless of who pays it, the city's kind of legal authority to charge fees is based upon us incurring a cost. So we have to go through that kind of cost analysis whenever we set up or pass on a fee to a resident or somebody claiming their vehicle or whomever it may be on the receiving end of the fee.
I see. All right, that's all. Thank you.
Any other colleague comments?
Quick
Councilmember Esparza?
Quick comment. I was happy to second the motion because I'm hoping that talks do continue and that they're fruitful and that we get some resolution where we are paying and getting the service that we're paying for. So thank you.
You're welcome. I concur. Thank you, staff, for all the work you've done. And thank you, towing companies, for what you do. We have regular tows in my neighborhood, and if you guys weren't around, it wouldn't look as nice as it does. So I appreciate that. On Councilmember Arenas' motion, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, that motion carries, and we are on to open forum. Roland?
Hello again. So what I'd like to do is to give you a quick heads up on the discussion about Coyote Valley on Wednesday. And the specific issue is that you actually are proposing to put a conservation easement in perpetuity on a parcel south of the Blossom Hill Cow train station, which, as far as I'm concerned, I earmarked it 6 years ago as a location for CMOF. And you're going to ask, well, why can't we put CMOF and Capital Expressway somewhere around there? And you've got to understand the Caltrain business plan, whereby we're going to have at least twice, if not 4 times as much traffic going down to Blossom Hill as we're going to have going down to Gilroy. So now let's suppose that we actually use that parcel. And let me explain to you in the last minute how the train movements work. The train stops at Blossom Hill, carries on to that location, which is near the Metcalf and Energy Center. At some point, it'll turn around, it'll come back to Blossom Hill. You've turned the train around once. Now let's suppose that you move CMOF to somewhere in the capital area. You are going to replicate the exact same problem you've had with CMOF where it is right now. The train is going to go down to Blossom Hill. You're going to turn it around. It's going to go back to Capitol, empty. From Capitol, you're going to have to turn it around. It's going to go back empty again to Blossom Hill. And then you're going to have to turn it around to eventually, send it and get back into service. You've turned the train around 3 times instead of once. You've got a cost issue because crews are costing $200 an hour. It takes a minimum 15 minutes to turn around. You've blown every time. It's $100 gone, and now you're completely clogging up the line. That section of line between Derrida and Blossom Hill needs twice as much capacity as it needs south of Blossom Hill. So I just thought I'd put it down there for your consideration. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you. Tessa?
Well, I guess I was just getting back to this point about accountability, which I appreciate in your issues with the towing accountability. But we have this major issue, which is climate change, and every department needs to look at climate change. And so when we are looking at the Vision Zero, just to bring closure to those issues, because if I look at the budget of what's happening with your suggestions in terms of education and police, research has shown, and other countries have proven, it's in the infrastructure, and you're not looking at that. It really needs to be in the infrastructure. We cannot educate people to be less selfish and less self-involved and speed being important and all these things. We have to create the infrastructure. That's what other countries have shown us, and we have to put the money towards that. And in our climate change issue, which this also goes along with, when you speed at 100 miles an hour, you're using a lot of gas. So we need to really look at that and focus on climate change through infrastructure adjustments. And then the other issue, of course, is accountability in terms of issues that are being addressed. And when things happen, how things get resolved. And we're not doing that. So I have this letter today that I brought to you that I want to say about getting back to us about issues. And this is what we're needing to have happen. So I want to submit this into the record and have some accountability happen about when we communicate with our council, when we even come to city council. There should be a feedback loop that the issues that we are addressing, it should be written down, that you take notes, and you get back to us about this. And that same thing when we send letters to council that don't get ignored, or we send letters to DOT or communicate with DOT. We need accountability. And I'm really, that's why we're in the world of hurt with Vision Zero, because there is no accountability. And that's why we need to really deal with our infrastructure and accountability.
Thank you.
As our emphasis. So where do I put
Claire
my notes?
Beekman, you can give them to Louis.
And then Okay, and then the only last thing was.
Your time is up.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Where do they go, these notes? Where do they go? Did they go to, they went to city council members too?
Hi, I wanted to speak in my remaining time. It's winter's coming on. There's an important city council meeting tomorrow on housing issues. And it's been almost a year now since the Google vote. So I wanted to speak a few words at this time. It's kind of important to me. Over the past 5 years, I've tried to better learn the public and community process and to contribute to important ideas developing in San Jose and across the country at this time. I am sorry if I have said things sometimes and that my personal habits in life may be considered as too awkward, uncomfortable, or not a part of the regular community dialogue. It is a learning process, and I have made mistakes along the way. But I feel I am trying to mostly work and contribute to the local community democratic process in simple, positive, and good terms. I feel there can be a simple joy and much respect for the past, present, and future for anyone who participates in the public process. Overall, with my mumbly and bumbly demeanor, thank you for your patience with myself, and as I've tried to work with a learning curve meant to be positive over the past 5 years. But to respect the local democratic process, there can be humble and open for everyone. Please consider for here and for the community listening at home, I still have a few remaining things. I still have some things to say in the future. Upcoming subjects I want to talk about include the future of 5G, the San Jose Sunshine Ordinance of 2007, the expanded role of a CIO officer, how Measure T public oversight in different areas can help with public accountability, and one more idea, the idea of a more open and efficient public process in the future.
Thank you, Blair.
Thank you.
Meeting is adjourned.